Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
It's wonderful to see all of you here.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. We'll wait a few more minutes for more people to join. We have here my classroom students as well as people who have joined for the webinar. The Maharashtra set is coming up on 27th December, and a lot of you are preparing for it, including my classroom students. So I thought I'll do a comprehensive revision, which will motivate all of you to spend the remaining 1 week productively to prepare for the exam. And also, my classroom students will get renewed motivation to study when all of you join us. It is wonderful. Thank you all for coming and trusting me once again. As you very well know, 2 days and 6 hours is not enough to cover the whole of English literature. But all of you have been studying already, and we will just revise all the main topics. And hopefully, some of the questions that we discussed today, etc., will be asked to you in the exam. Or whatever information we share today will help you remember what you already know. It will also give you some guidance to work in the coming 1 week. Revision always means a new look at the subject. And any small webinar that you attend with me means we are lifetime friends, and I will try to give you whatever you need. You can tell me your requirements, and I will try to help in whatever way I can. So what I mean is these 6 hours is more than 6 hours. If we are lucky, it will be the building block, it will be the stepping stone for your career. We have 55, 56 participants now. Good evening to all those who have joined now. Vandana, I see your message. So many of you have attended a lot of webinars and programs that I've conducted before. Many of you have our notes and study materials. Many of you are people who have done classroom coaching or who are right now doing classroom coaching. So I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion happening today that might be overlapping with what you already know. But there will also be a lot of new information, I'm sure. I'm terribly happy that all of you have joined us today. I have seen that sometimes more than a very elaborate course, these short programs will inspire people, and it might even be more valuable than a long-term course, because in this condensed time you get more from me, and I will also try to give you more elaborately, in a condensed manner as well as elaborately. Just a few minutes more, a couple of minutes more. I'm very glad that I titled this program Stories to Remember. It's I think a beautiful title that addresses many of our problems. I happened to come across that thought accidentally. Almost all of us, because our subject is so vast, find it difficult to remember information and names and years. And these days, our exams are all based on the text. Questions are based on the text, detailed questions from the text. So we need to discuss the stories in detail, the stories of authors, the stories of texts. It's past 3 o'clock and we have 73 participants. They are still coming in. It is not possible to cover everything from one end to the other in 6 hours. Also in the exam, they don't ask you in a chronological manner. So for the sake of exams that you might be preparing for, what I have decided to do is a mix of the random as well as the orderly. Today we will discuss a number of, I think it is audible to everybody. Rucha, can you please turn up your volume and see? Can you all hear me except Richa, everybody else?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Rucha, please turn up your volume and see. What I'm thinking is, I will just think of some authors here and there, and then we will talk about that author in a chronological manner as well as that author's contemporaries. So one big area will be covered. Again, we'll go to some other area and cover that area. Again, one more area, cover that area, like that. This workshop is only for 2 days because there are only 2 days in a weekend. But if you like it very much, and if a lot of things still remain to be done, I can always offer 1 day extra for free. So we'll meet again if necessary before the exam another day. Yeah. So I think we can start now. It is like 88 participants, but I know there are more. They will be coming. As I already told you, all these people are not people who have come for the webinar. They are, some of them are already here as my classroom students of 2 batches. 2 batch classroom students, the previous batch and this batch. Previous batch because we had the corona and did not work out properly that time. And now we have totally new people who have joined us. Okay, so I think that's enough of waiting. I have a small presentation here, which is hardly a presentation. It is just to help us get a direction. I have not put a lot of material in the presentation or anything, just pictures and just names, that's all. We will cover a lot of things, and if you want whatever authors we covered, I can just make a little bit extra details I can put in and make a handout and send it to you in your group. Okay, I have been working on it and we can develop it and send it to you in immediately after the webinar in one day. Okay. So stories to remember. Thank you, God, for this beautiful title and this beautiful direction. Let us share the stories of authors and works. And hopefully, in whatever exam you're writing, these authors and works will be immensely helpful. There will be questions. And I hope this webinar will be the reason for your great success in your career. What I want to do is just think of an author and just talk about that author in detail, discussing questions and answers, of course, and also talk about the contemporaries of that author. So what do you think? Who do you think the first author is going to be? If you ask me, who is the greatest writer in English literature? Because I have read a lot about Milton and Milton's works, I would say that despite all the problems in Milton's works, it's very old-fashioned, Milton's work. And also it has our sexism and things like that we talk about today in contemporary theory. But despite all that, I would still say Milton is one of the greatest authors. He was one of the most self-conscious authors. And, he completely changed many things about English literature forever. There is also, of course, Shakespeare, but we don't want to talk about Elizabethan period because I wanted to talk about periods that people would know less about. That is why. John Milton lived from 1608 to 1674. Please remember, today itself, if you are going to write exams, write a list of all the major authors you can think about, look up their years, and somehow connect them, because one or two questions will be asked where you will be required to know the years. People ask me, how can I remember years? The easiest thing I can tell you is write them down, find out some connection or something else that happened at that time, etc. And seriously sit and study. What happened in 1609? What happened at the same time as 1674 when he died, etc. would help you remember. 1608, that is 1 year before Shakespeare's sonnets were published in quarto form. Shakespeare's sonnets were published in quarto form by Thomas Thorpe in 1609. Milton was born 1 year before that. And he died in 1674. That is during the Restoration period. And he wrote all his major works after the Restoration. And this was the year in which Paradise Lost was published in 12 books. In months before he died, he brought it out in 12 books. In 1667, he had brought it out in 10 books. In Trivandrum, our test is functioning in one house number 67. So I tell my students that is the code. You enter this house and you will have to do hard work. Your paradise is lost. But when you go out, your paradise will be regained. So if you can remember that, 1667, Paradise Lost, 10 books. Early works of Milton. Whenever you study, remember this, whenever you study, you have to study the works of that author in a chronological manner. Do not study here and there something. What are the works of Milton? Don't start here. Of course, you can start here saying the greatest works of Milton are Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistes. But one of the earlier works of Milton was L'Allegro and Il Penseroso. Like that, chronologically, you should study, at least from now on. That will save you a lot of effort. Okay? Now, Milton was born in Cheapside, Brett Street in Cheapside. His father was a scribe or scrivener. And he went to St. Paul's School, and after that, Christ's College, Cambridge. From a very young age, he knew that he had to study a lot, he had to be a scholar, he had to be a great poet. He started writing when he was in Cambridge itself. One of the important books or poems that he wrote when he was in Cambridge was On Shakespeare. The poem is called On Shakespeare, and it is about Shakespeare. On Shakespeare. And it was published along with Shakespeare's second folio. I don't want to tell you unnecessary details. I want to focus on the kind of questions asked in sets. So let us talk about L'Allegro and Il Penseroso. These books came in the 1630s and 40s. L'Allegro and Il Penseroso, each is about one day in the countryside. Both are pastoral poems. L'Allegro is about one happy day in the countryside. And Il Penseroso is about one melancholy day in the countryside. In L'Allegro, he is describing pastoral elements, nature, beauty, and he is also describing the goddess Euphrosyne, who is the goddess of mirth. In Il Penseroso, the goddess who appears is melancholy. These are pastoral poems. So, there is a pastoral tradition in Milton's early career. Another poem by Milton is also pastoral elegy, Lycidas. They can ask you questions like, which of the following is true about Milton? Milton wrote in a classical style. That means he wrote epics. He wrote pastoral poetry. Pastoral poetry is also classical. It was Theocritus and Virgil in the classical period who started pastoral poetry. Virgil, the father of epic, is also the father of pastoral poetry. Pastoral poetry does not mean romantic. It is classical and very artificial. Another early set of poems that he wrote is a set of masques, M-A-S-Q-U-E-S, masques, arcades and comus, of which comus is more important. Comus is a masque. A masque is performed in court only by amateur courtiers, not by professional actors. Now, one thing very interesting about comus is it has the same theme as Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistes. What is that theme? It is temptation.
Is she stuck?
Ma'am, you're
Ma'am,
not
we can't.
audible, ma'am.
Ma'am, we can't hear you.
She left the meeting. She'll be back soon, I guess.
Maybe there is some network problem on her side, so please wait for her. Don't be panic.
Ice cream guys. Ice cream
I'm so sorry. My laptop switched off suddenly, even though it had 35% charge. Sorry about that. It will not happen again. I am charging it. Some people have been saying it is not audible. Again, I'm asking everybody, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am. You are
ma'am.
not
Yes,
audible.
ma'am. You are audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Those who can somebody post in the chat box? Those who cannot hear, please turn up your volume or. Can somebody post in the webinar WhatsApp group also, please? I will continue. I think my laptop is breathing its last or something. Suddenly it switches off. Can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I was talking about l'Allegro and Il Penseroso. Arcades and comus, they are masks, I said. Other writers of masks are Ben Jonson. Before that, John Lilly. Lycidas is a pastoral poem. Milton had written Latin poems also at the beginning of his career. There is a poem that is very similar to Lycidas. A Latin poem that is very similar to Lycidas is there. It is called Epitaphium Damonis or Damon's Epitaph. In the exam, they will ask you questions like what is an epitaph? Literary terms are important, as you know. They will ask you questions like what is an epigraph and give you 4 options. So when you study and you come across literary terms like
The
that, please,
PPT is not visible.
PPT is not visible.
Yeah, ma'am. Yes. If it is not visible, ma'am.
1 minute. Can you see now?
Yeah, ma'am. Yes, yes. Yes, ma'am.
I was saying that when you study and when you come across words like epitaph, etc., look it up. Don't just think of, listen to me, everybody, please mute yourselves. Don't just think of taking M.H. Abrams's glossary and studying all the literary terms one by one. That can be done, but what is better is you study the terms as you come across them when you study. Did you understand? Don't take anything for granted. When you come across Damon's epitaph, Epitaphium Damonis, look up what is epitaph. Epitaph is a poem written when somebody dies. But that kind of definition is not enough. If possible, look up in M.H. Abrams's glossary itself. Now, Milton, after he left Cambridge, he lived in Horton, one place. These poems, Arcades, Comus, Lycidas, were all written when he lived in Horton. They were called Horton poems. And after that, Milton left for Europe. He traveled for 15 months in Europe, at which time he met Galileo and many other Italians. And Milton called his prose that he wrote at this time his left hand because he reserved his right hand for poetry. Milton called his prose his left hand. Milton's left hand refers to his prose. He wrote prose about religion, about politics, and about some social issues like divorce. Milton has written anti-prelatical tracts about religion, anti-monarchical tracts, because remember, he was a Puritan. And he has written anti-monarchical tracts. He was the spokesperson of the Puritans in the Civil War. The Civil War that happened from 1642 to 1660. And then Milton wrote pamphlets on divorce. He wrote about divorce because his own wife had left him at that time. And the poems that he wrote, the prose that he wrote ended with Areopagitica that came in 1644. Areopagitica came in 1644. The very next year, Milton's collected poems were published in 1645. Please, about all the major writers, remember when their collections were published. Sometimes they will ask you like that. Who are the publishers of major writers? That you should know. Who published Spenser's works? William Ponsonby. I don't know if it is important for net this time, but definitely for, sorry, set. But definitely for net, they will ask questions like that. Set will be a little easier. They will not ask you very unexpected questions, hopefully. And the three important poems of Milton's career, the most important poems of Milton's career are Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistes. These three poems came after the Restoration, after 1660. So when you study an author, what are the early works? What are the later works? In what order did he write them? Roughly. If you study like that, all the chronology questions will be very easy. Otherwise, chronologically arranged questions will be very difficult. Some story out of it, then you will be able to remember. Every single work you don't need to know. When you answer chronology questions, they expect you to know only 2 out of 4. Half if you know, you will be able to answer. So, what is the story of Paradise Lost? Everybody knows that Paradise Lost is about the fall of man. He wrote it to justify the ways of God to man. The first book of Paradise Lost begins after the war in heaven is over. The angels fought God for 3 days and they were lying there, thrown out of heaven. And then the first to wake up is Satan. And then next Beelzebub. Then one by one the fallen angels wake up. Satan decides to build a pandemonium or a court for himself. And then there is the fallen angels meeting at the pandemonium in book 2. And after that, we move to God. So in the first 2 books, you are seeing Satan more than God. Satan, as you know, is called the real hero of Paradise Lost. It was Dryden who first mentioned it. From Dryden's time, people have been saying that Satan is the real hero of Paradise Lost. It was William Blake who said in The Marriage of Heaven that Satan is the devil's party without knowing it. Swarayush sir, can you mute yourself? Swarayush sir, can you mute yourself? Yeah. Please turn off all your mics. When I am presenting, I cannot turn it off from here. That is why. Please turn off all your mics. It will be better. Whatever private conversation you're having, you don't want us to hear.
स्वरेश सर जरा तुम्ही माइक म्यूट करता का स्वरेश सर
Yeah. But there will be a lag. When I am saying it immediately, then you won't be hearing it, I think. That is why. Okay. So I was talking about Paradise Lost. In the first book, I said Satan and his followers are waking up and building pandemonium. Mulciber is building pandemonium. In book 2, Satan is opening debate in pandemonium. In book 3, which is also prescribed in universities, God foresees the danger to man from Satan. And his son, the Son of God, will conquer death. It is decided. In book 4, for the first time, Satan enters Eden. He cheats Uriel into telling him the way to Eden, and Satan disguises himself as a cherub. In this book, you can see him as a cherub, a cormorant, and a toad. 3 animals. Cherub is an angel. Cherub, C-H-E-R-U-B. Cormorant and toad. These are the disguises that he takes. And Satan after that leaves because he was discovered. In book 5, 6, 7, and 8, Raphael is talking to Adam. In books 5, 6, 7, Raphael is warning Adam and telling him about the creation of the world and other things. In book 8, Adam is asking questions to Raphael. And in book 9, there is the fall of man in spite of the warning. Adam and Eve were working together all these days. In book 9, Adam and Eve want to separate. Eve wants to separately work to save time. What is their work? Their work is tending to the plants in the Garden of Eden, taking care of the plants. And then Eve is approached by Satan in the form of a serpent. Satan saw a serpent sleeping, and he enters the serpent's body and then comes and talks to Eve. Eve is surprised because a serpent is talking to her like a human being. And the serpent says, I got this skill of talking from eating a certain fruit. And then he takes Eve to the forbidden tree. And Eve says, no, we can't eat this fruit. God has asked us not to eat. And then Satan tries to seduce her. He praises her beauty. He calls her the goddess of the universe and praises her beauty. Eve says, no, I can't eat it. And then he tells her, finally, it is when he uses reason that she falls. He tells her, what is wrong in eating? If you eat, see, when I ate it, I got reason. So God is trying to prevent you from being like him. That is why he does not want you to eat the fruit. So think about it. What is wrong in eating? Even if you eat, God is not going to do anything. Do you think God will kill his favorite creation? Nothing will happen. Like that, when he reasons with her, she eats the fruit. And in the same way as she was tempted by Satan, she tempts Adam. That is how Adam is approached by Eve. And Adam eats the fruit not because he is tempted. He thinks of God. And then he thinks of Eve. He thinks a lot about God before he eats the fruit. And he thinks about Eve and thinks that he does not want her to be alone in punishment. So he keeps her company by eating the fruit. This fall of man resulted in the expulsion of man from Eden. In book 10, Son of God, that is Jesus Christ, comes and pronounces punishment. In book 11 and 12, the punishment is going to be carried out. In book 11, the Son intercedes the Father or talks to the Father on behalf of man. Remember, the Son was also there when man was made. God and Son both love man. And the Son does not want man to die. So the Son, that is Jesus Christ, offers himself as ransom. He will go and conquer death. That is what happens in Paradise Regained. In Paradise Regained, Christ is the second Adam. Christ is tempted by Satan, and Satan gives him public life, but Christ does not want it. Christ chooses to live a private life. Paradise Regained is an epyllion or little epic. Which of the following is not an epic, they can ask. They will give you epics as well as little epics. Little epics are short epics. Another example, the most famous example of literary epic in English is Paradise Lost. The most famous example of little epic in English is Paradise Regained. But Shakespeare's Venus and Adonis has been called an epyllion. If you look up epyllion or little epics, you will get a list also in the internet. As I told you, Christ is tempted by Satan like man was tempted by Satan, but Christ overcomes temptation. Paradise Regained was published along with Samson Agonistes in 1671. Remember, Paradise Lost came in 10 books in 1667. Paradise Regained and Samson Agonistes together published in 1671. And in 1674, Paradise Lost was published in 12 books. Samson Agonistes is written like a Greek tragedy. It is a closet drama meant for reading. That means it is written like a Greek tragedy. Only Greek tragedies were written like closet drama. Greek and Roman tragedies were written like closet dramas. Closet drama means a play that is meant only for reading. Another term for closet drama is verse play or poetic drama. In the 20th century, poetic drama was revived in the modernist period. T.S. Eliot, Christopher Fry, then W.B. Yeats, all of them wrote poetic plays. W.H. Auden, remember, poetic drama was revived in the modernist period by T.S. Eliot, who wrote The Murder in the Cathedral, The Family Reunion, The Confidential Clerk, The Elder Statesman, etc. The Rock is a pageant play that he wrote, a religious play, The Rock by T.S. Eliot. These are plays. Which of the following is not a play by T.S. Eliot? Like that, they can ask questions. Not only about Eliot, any other writer. Then Christopher Fry's most famous play is The Lady is Not for Burning, poetic play. W.B. Yeats wrote poetic plays. The Countess Kathleen is the most famous. Before that, Alfred Tennyson also wrote poetic plays. Alfred Tennyson. Alfred Tennyson's poetic drama is written at the end of his career. Beckett is one play by Tennyson. Before that, Byron. Byron wrote poetic plays. Famous is Manfred. Manfred, Sardana Palace, then The Two Foscari, Cain, C-A-I-N. When you study, you should study in a chronological manner, but also cross-connect like this. When you come across the word poetic plays, think of what are the poetic plays in English, who all wrote poetic plays, why did they write poetic plays, think like that. I don't mean just before the exam, but in a long term when you study, I studied like that and I got a lot of information by thinking like that. So remember in NET and SET, they have divided the syllabus into genres, poetry, fiction, drama, short story, like that. So to think of genres is very important. Poetic play is a genre. There is another genre that Milton wrote. No, I didn't tell the story of Samson Agonistes. Agonistes means champion. Samson the champion. He is an Israeli leader who is imprisoned by their enemies, the Philistines, in a temple. And he is tied up. He cannot realize his strength. Why? Because his hair is being cut out. His power or strength lies in his hair. The woman who loves him, Delilah, is doing it. She's doing it thinking that at least then the enemies will not kill him. And finally, Samson realizes his strength and pulls down the temple and kills everybody. Somebody's mic is unmuted. Will you please mute your mic? Everybody, please check your mic and please mute yourself. There is one option. When I start, I can mute you all, and I cannot allow you to unmute yourselves. If that happens, then I think everybody will stay silent. Otherwise, automatically your mics will get turned on. Anyway, but then you won't be able to communicate with me. It will be one-sided. At the end, we can communicate. We'll see. Samson then pulls down the temple and kills everybody. Being a classical drama, this ending is reported by a messenger. Spectacle should not be shown on stage, isn't it? In classical drama, a lot of spectacle should not be shown on stage. That was Aristotelian rule. Aristotle talked about 6 constituent elements of tragedy. Samson Agonistes is a tragedy. And Aristotle talked about 6 constituent elements of tragedy. The most important is plot. The second one is character, because without character, there is no plot. Plot, character, then third element is thought. Character's most important thing is thought. And that thought is known through diction. So fourth element is diction. In this order it is plot, character, thought, diction. Diction is decorated by song. And song can be supplemented with spectacle. Spectacle is the least important element. Spectacle should not be shown on stage. When some spectacular things happen, it should only be reported by a messenger. So at the end, Samson Agonistes' tragedy is reported by a messenger. Samson Agonistes that play happens through monologues and dialogues. All the time, either Samson is giving monologues or he's talking to somebody who visits him. That is the style of Samson Agonistes. When you study a book, a very important book especially, it is extremely important to look up the text. Even if you don't read everything or know everything or understand everything, it's okay. But at least the opening, the style, a little bit, a few paragraphs or one page, if you have time, you should read. Milton has written also 23 sonnets. The 23 sonnets are all based on religious and political themes. A very important sonnet is on his blindness, where Milton talks about his own blindness as being the trial of God for having given him greater gifts. On his blindness. As you know, Milton wrote in a grand style, a very Latinized style full of epic similes or Homeric similes and late motifs or recurring images like labyrinth, maze. And Milton's grand style is a book by Christopher Rhys. Milton's grand style, or generally grand style, was discussed by Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold discussed grand style, not only Milton's, but Homer's, Dante's. Matthew Arnold talked about simple grand style and severe grand style. So, in a nutshell, these are the works by John Milton. Now, the next discussion we should have is about his contemporaries. That is how we will cover Milton's age. Milton was born in 1608, remember. At that time, Shakespeare is still living. Shakespeare died in 1616. So Milton was 8 years old when Shakespeare died. Connect like that. Tell yourself, okay, this person was this many years old when that happened. Milton was 1 year old when Shakespeare's sonnets were published. Milton was 8 years old when Shakespeare died. And Milton lived at the time of the Civil War. The Civil War in England happened in the 17th century between the Royalists or the King's Party called the Cavaliers. And opposite the Cavaliers were the Puritans or the Roundheads. The Cavaliers were soldiers who supported Charles I. Many of the Cavaliers were poets. because it was part of a gentleman's culture to write poetry, to compose poetry. It is said that William J. Long, in his famous History of English Literature, has talked about how many of the cavaliers wrote poetry while fighting a duel or exercising a horse. That is what he has said. Because it was part of a gentleman's culture. And the cavalier poets include Richard Lovelace, John Suckling, Edmund Waller, Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, etc. Who of the following is not a cavalier poet kind of questions will certainly come. The cavalier poets wrote in a very easy, smooth style, beautiful style. They did not write in a disturbing manner. They did not write in a tragic manner. Because they were courtiers writing about the king, they wrote in a very beautiful style, easy manner, not like the metaphysical poets. And the cavaliers wrote about platonic love. Because many times the cavaliers or the soldiers or the poets presented themselves as the sweetheart of the king. So they couldn't talk about physical erotic love like the metaphysical poets. They talked about platonic love. However, some cavaliers were metaphysical poets. They lived at the same time, and the cavaliers were all influenced by Ben Jonson. And the metaphysical poets were all influenced by John Donne. Imagine that time that they lived. The Civil War is about to start and Charles I is ruling. Before that, James I was ruling. And at that time, there was so much brilliance, courtly life. Religion was a very important theme. Religious debates abounded. And the cavaliers were composing poetry easily like that. They were all admiring Ben Jonson. The cavaliers, some of the cavaliers were called sons of Ben. Now, the cavaliers lived in the period called Caroline period. Caroline period means the period of Charles I. The period of Charles II is not Caroline period. It is called Restoration period. Carolus is the Latin for Charles. That is why it is called Caroline period. Now, I was just waxing eloquent on cavalier poets. Let us talk about Thomas Browne. He was a very religious writer and a contemporary of Milton. Thomas Browne is the author of very religious works and philosophical works. Thomas Browne's Religio Medici, the title means religion of a doctor. Thomas Browne was a doctor as well as a knight, Sir Thomas Browne. And Religio Medici inspired Dryden's Religio Laici. Remember Dryden's Religio Laici? It was the first of the religious poems written by Dryden, and it supported the Anglican Church. Immediately after that, Dryden converted to Catholicism, and he wrote another book supporting Catholicism. That is The Hind and the Panther. I will repeat. Thomas Browne wrote Religio Medici. And later on, Dryden wrote Religio Laici. That means layman's religion, layman's faith. Religio Laici was the first religious poem by Dryden. It supported Anglican Church because at that time Dryden was an Anglican. And later Dryden wrote The Hind and the Panther, supporting Catholic Church because at that time he had converted to Catholicism. So Thomas Browne wrote Religio Medici. It is an examination of his own religious beliefs. And he also wrote Hydriotaphia or the Urn Burial. Hydriotaphia or the Urn Burial. Urn Burial, because people in the Roman period, before the Anglo-Saxons in the Roman period, people were buried in urns or big pots. Some burial urns were discovered in a place called Norfolk, Norfolk. That is why, based on that, Thomas Brown wrote Hydriotaphia, or the urn burial. Hydriotaphia is regarded his masterpiece about Roman burial urns in the discovery of Roman burial urns in Norfolk. And in this book, Urn Burial, he talks about, can you hear me, everybody? People are still saying not audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
can hear
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
No problem. If anybody cannot hear or log in, etc., that is why we have YouTube link. Urn Burial was written about the discovery of burial urns. Naturally, this is a poem about mortality and melancholy. Mortality, melancholy, these elements are there. I'm just mentioning the two most important works by Thomas Brown. The next important writer is Thomas Fuller. Thomas Fuller, you may not know very much about him. Thomas Brown, I'm sure everybody knows. Thomas Fuller is not that famous, but one book is famous, History of the Worthies of England. History of the Worthies of England is a collection of biographies. So remember, in Milton's time, in the 17th century, people were writing biographies. There was another biographer in Milton's time, that is Isaac Walton. Isaac Walton. We will talk about him also presently. Jeremy Taylor is important. Jeremy Taylor wrote Holy Living, Holy Dying, and Sermons. He was the chief enemy of Milton. Jeremy Taylor was Milton's adversary, enemy. Holy Living, Holy Dying. Are you getting to see Milton's age now? Like a story, his works, his contemporaries. As I told you, Isaac Walton wrote biographies. He wrote biographies of many contemporary writers, including John Donne and George Herbert. George Herbert, the metaphysical poet, who was a contemporary of John Donne. Isaac Walton wrote the biographies of John Donne and George Herbert. Isaac Walton is also well known for another book, The Complete Angler. What do you mean by angling? Angling means fishing. The Complete Angler is a book on fishing by Isaac Walton. Why would anybody write about fishing? Because fishing was the gentleman's pastime, the contemplative man's recreation. That is the subtitle of Isaac Walton. I'm just lecturing for some time. When you start getting restless or bored, we will have some other strategies. Okay. Thomas Hobbes is a philosopher, a political philosopher who wrote Leviathan, Leviathan. Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. It's a book of political philosophy. It's about the king and how the king's body is compared to the commonwealth. Thomas Hobbes was an empiricist, an empirical philosopher. In the 17th century, at this time, empiricism came into being. Empiricism means the belief that sensory knowledge is the source of truth. Sensory experience is the source of truth. That is the meaning of empiricism. Sensory experience. That means experience through eyes, through ears, through the senses. That is called empiricism. Another philosopher after Thomas Hobbes was a very major empiricist. That is John Locke. John Locke, who wrote an essay concerning human understanding. Empiricism originated in England. Voltaire was influenced by empiricism. Voltaire, the French writer, was influenced by empiricism. Voltaire is one of the people who initiated the French Revolution. Voltaire is the pen name of François Marie Arouet. Voltaire is the pen name of Francois, Francois. Francois. Then Marie. Then Arouet, Aru. After this time, at this time, there was also the metaphysical poets, as you know. The metaphysical poets are poets inspired by John Donne, everybody knows. I'm not going into the unnecessary details, the simple details. It was, but still a little bit, it was Dryden who first used the term metaphysics in relation to Donne. Donne affects the metaphysics, said Dryden. It was Samuel Johnson, Dr. Johnson, in Life of Cowley, who coined the term metaphysical school. One of the metaphysical poets was Abraham Cowley. He is the author of The Mistress. They can ask you match the following. They can give you names of metaphysical poets and ask you to match them against their works. Abraham Cowley's Mistress is a love poem. There are two epics that he wrote. Davy Days and the Civil War. Abraham Cowley's Davy Days and the Civil War. Don't strain to write everything, because as I told you, much of this information I will send you as a handout, okay, so that you will be able to study from that. The Davy Days and the Civil War are epics. Of Myself is a verse essay written by Abraham Cowley. Of Myself is a verse essay. Pindaric Odes is a book by Abraham Cowley, where he originated the irregular ode. Pindaric Odes is a book by Abraham Cowley, where he developed from the Pindaric Ode what is called the irregular ode. A Pindaric Ode is an ode with strict stanzaic form. Strophe, antistrophe, epode. 3 stanzaic forms are there in Pindaric Ode. In irregular ode, originated by Abraham Cowley, 3 kinds of stanza are not there. You can write in any way you want. That is why it is called irregular ode. Did you understand? Abraham Cowley originated the irregular ode. The next important metaphysical poet is Andrew Marvell. Andrew Marvell was a Puritan. He was a scribe of our Milton. Milton and Andrew Marvell knew each other. Milton went blind and he had scribes. Andrew Marvell was a scribe. And like Milton, Marvell also was a Republican. Republican means one who believes in election of leaders. Not in heredity, not in hereditary rule, but leaders should be elected. Andrew Marvell is a poet. As everybody knows, he wrote To His Coy Mistress, but he also wrote other important poems that are prescribed in syllabi, such as The Definition of Love, Upon Appleton House, The Garden, Bermudas, etc. When you prepare for Maharashtra sets, you can't do that right now, but what you should have done before is you should collect all the syllabi as much as possible from different universities in Maharashtra. From different universities in Maharashtra, collect as much as possible the syllabi. And the books that are prescribed in those syllabi, you should definitely study. So, Andrew Marvell I was talking about. Then we have Robert Herrick and Thomas Carew. They were both Cavalier poets, as you know. Robert Herrick wrote a lot of nature poetry, unlike the other metaphysicals. Are you feeling bored, anyone? Anyone?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
I wanted to bring in a lot of humor and playing and all that, but when I planned out my work, I realized that, you know, it is better to cover more than waste time in laughing about something. If you fall asleep, it is your duty to keep yourself awake. If I bring in more fun, we might lose time. That is the problem. In between, a little bit of, you know, when call out a few names or say something extra, then you will be refreshed. Feel free to eat something or drink something. Are you able to follow me, Shweta Meshram?
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. So I hope you're enjoying. What
Yes,
are
ma'am.
we discussing?
Yes,
Asma?
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. Aditya, are you there?
Ma'am.
Muhammad Ansar?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for joining us. Akhil Premanand? I'm sure he's also there. Amulya? Renuga, are you there? Some people may not turn on their mics. I'm sure they are there. Yogesh, Yamuna, Vrishali. Okay. Everybody. Yeah. We were in the middle of metaphysical poets. Robert Herrick, I was saying, wrote a lot of nature poetry. His most important book is Hesperidus. Hesperidus. And some of his important poems are Two Daffodils, Two Violets. Thomas Carew has written an elegy on John Donne. And he has also written an ode addressed to Ben Jonson. Very important are the religious poets among the metaphysicals. Who are the religious poets among the metaphysicals? George Herbert.
John Donne, George Herbert,
Richard Crashaw, Thomas Traherne, isn't it? George Herbert wrote pattern poetry. He was a clergyman and he wrote a lot of devotional poetry. George Herbert's collection of poems is called The Temple. Why is it called The Temple? Because the poet is the temple of God. The poet is the temple of God. That is why he titled his poems Temple. His poems were published by Nicholas Ferrar, his friends. And George Herbert's famous poems are The Pulley, The Altar, The Collar, Easter Wings. Will you remember? After this, I will ask you one rapid fire quiz session from whatever we discussed. Then Henry Vaughan has written the famous poem, The Retreat. The Retreat is a poem that inspired Wordsworth's Immortality Ode. Henry Vaughan also wrote The Waterfall, Silex Scintillans. That is another book by Henry Vaughan. Silex Scintillans, S-I-L-E-X, Silex Scintillans. Thomas Traherne has written a lot of poems that were discovered in the 20th century only. It is called Century of Meditations. Thomas Traherne, another religious metaphysical poet, his book is called Century of Meditations. That book, this question was asked in NET recently. John Denham wrote topographical poetry. His famous topographical poem or poem about a region, it is Cooper's Hill. John Denham's Cooper's Hill is famous. What is topographical poetry? Topographical poetry means poetry that is written about a region. Very famous topographical poem of Alexander Pope is Windsor Forest. Windsor Forest. Then another contemporary of Milton is our John Dryden. John Dryden is a contemporary of Milton. John Dryden even wrote an opera based on Paradise Lost. John Dryden's opera based on Paradise Lost. It's called The State of Innocence. Do you remember? Dryden's earliest poem was written about Oliver Cromwell. It was called Heroic Stanzas on the Death of Oliver Cromwell. John Dryden's earliest poem was Heroic Stanzas on the Death of Oliver Cromwell. And after that, Dryden wrote about restoration of Charles. Oliver Cromwell is the enemy of Charles. Dryden wrote about Cromwell, and then after that he wrote about Charles. He changed his opinion. And that book about Charles's restoration is called Astrea Redux. After that, Dryden wrote another poem called Annus Mirabilis. It is very important to know the works of Dryden. Annus Mirabilis. He wrote that poem Annus Mirabilis about the year 1666. The term Annus Mirabilis means wonderful year. After this, Dryden turned to drama. Dryden wrote plays for 15 years. Which are Dryden's plays? The Wild Gallant, The Indian Emperor, The Conquest of Granada, Aurangzeb, and finally, he wrote, all these plays were written in heroic couplets. These plays that I mentioned were all written in heroic couplets. The last, one of the last important plays was written in blank verse. That is All for Love, subtitled The World Well Lost. All for Love, or The World Well Lost. That book was based on the story of Antony and Cleopatra. Dryden at this time became poet laureate in 1668. And at this time, Dryden also wrote Of Dramatic Poesy, his critical essay. Of Dramatic Poesy is his critical essay. After this, Dryden turned to satire. Dryden wrote Absalom and Achitophel, The Medal, and Macflecknoe, 3 original satires, attacking Earl of Shaftesbury and Shadwell. There were three original satires by Dryden, only 3. Absalom and Achitophel, it's a political allegory, isn't it? Then The Medal and Macflecknoe. These 3 satires criticized or attacked the Earl of Shaftesbury and Thomas Shadwell. After this, Dryden spent, at this time, Dryden's enemies won. Dryden's king, James II, lost power. And whoever Dryden was fighting, they gained power. So Dryden lost all his offices. He was poet laureate. He was historiographer royal. All that was lost. And his enemy, Shadwell, was given poet laureateship. Dryden had a very bad time. And he spent his last years writing translations. These were published as Fables, Ancient and Modern. Fables, Ancient and Modern. And it had the famous preface to the Fables. In Preface to the Fables, Dryden supports Chaucer. He compares Chaucer and Ovid, and he praises Chaucer. That is where, in Preface to the Fables, we have the phrase, here is God's plenty. And he says, Chaucer is a rough diamond that should be polished ere it shines. Shall I give you a surprise? After our session today, after a couple of hours after our session, I will give you an online quiz where I will ask you questions based on all this. You can play online, okay? We do that in the classroom and in Rapid Fire Ultimate Battle every day. You people can also do it, okay? I have already prepared the questions. And Dryden died, you know, in which year? 1700. At the beginning of the 18th century, Dryden died. And Dryden was the first neoclassical writer. He was a critic, he was a playwright, he was a satirist. Dryden was the first neoclassicist. He was a liberal neoclassicist. And he was the first comparative critic. What did Dr. Johnson say about Dryden and English poetry? He found it brick and left it marble. Dryden found English poetry brick but left it marble. That is what Dr. Johnson said about Dryden. So look at this. We are actually looking at Milton, but we talked about so many other people, isn't it? And we talked about Paradise Lost. Tell me, what are the other now let me ask you some questions. What are some of the other epics in English? Do you know any other epic in English? Anybody?
Beowulf.
Beowulf is an old English epic in 2 parts. Fairy Queen is an epic. Fairy Queen is an epic in 6 books by Edmund Spenser. Gloriana is Queen Elizabeth. That time in England, Queen Elizabeth was called Gloriana. And King Arthur is her suitor. And Fairy Queen has 6 books where each book is about the adventures of one knight. And each knight stands for a virtue. In the first book of Fairy Queen, we have the adventures of the Red Cross Knights, standing for holiness. Yes. Also standing for Anglican Church. Red Cross Knights. He protects a woman called Una. Una is true church. And her enemy Duessa is false church. Will you remember? Then in the second book, you have the adventures of Sir Gayan, who represents the virtue of temperance. Sir Gayan, the Knight of Temperance. The third book is about a female warrior, Britomart, who represents chastity. Female warrior, Britomart, who represents chastity. Fourth book is about Triamond and Campbell, representing friendship. Fifth book is about Artigal, representing justice. And sixth book is about Calidore, representing courtesy. Did you understand? First book, Red Cross Knight of Holiness. Second, Gayan Knight of Temperance. Third, Britomart, chastity. Fourth, Triamond and Campbell, friendship. Fifth, Artigal, justice. Sixth, Calidore, courtesy. Fairy Queen. That is the epic that we are talking about by Edmund Spenser. Fairy Queen was written in which meter? Spenserian stanza.
Spenserian stanza.
Fairy Queen was written in Spenserian stanza, which has 8 lines of iambic pentameter followed by iambic hexameter or Alexandrine. Will you remember?
Yes, ma'am.
8 lines of iambic pentameter followed by Alexandrine or iambic hexameter. Okay, let me ask you questions once again from what I taught you, from what we discussed. Who of these writers wrote Complete Angler, subtitled The Contemplative Man's Recreation? The Complete Angler or The Contemplative
Isaac
Man's
Walton.
Recreation.
Isaac
Walton. Who of these writers was famous for his sermons?
George Herbert.
Actually, John Donne also, but he is not given here. Actually, I meant Jeremy Taylor. Jeremy Taylor was famous for the book Sermons. Yes. Do you know who of these writers wrote The Garden? Definition of
Andrew Marvell.
Andrew Marvell. Who of these writers wrote a topographical poem, Cooper's Hill?
John Denham.
When did Dryden become poet laureate?
1668.
1668. Everything you remember. So that was a lot of discussion about Renaissance England, British literature. We will come back to British literature, but let us see what is in store in the next slide. Are you ready?
Yes,
Please
Yes,
refresh
Yes.
yourself, wash your faces,
Yes,
or
ma'am.
eat something or drink something. Don't just tire yourself out for 3 hours, okay? Okay. Please switch off your mics and videos also. Remember, this is coming in YouTube, and whatever accidentally you do or say there, you don't want it to be there forever in YouTube, right? So when you're relaxing in your bed or walking about or saying something to your family members, please switch off your mics and videos. That is better for you. We can hear what you're saying. Switch off your mics.
इन्स्टिट्यूट 1 लाख रुपये पे 90% सक्सेस 90% पोरं पास आउट होते स्टेटला नेटला
Sir, again your mic is turned on. Pramod Patil sir. Sir, you have to switch off your mic. Swarayush sir, have you switched off your mic? Okay. Hare, next writer we are talking about is Derek Walcott. Completely different. We are jumping to another area altogether. Which country is he from? Which region?
Africa. Caribbean.
Caribbean. Correct. He's from St. Lucia. He's a Caribbean writer who passed away recently in 2017. He was the first Caribbean writer to get Nobel Prize.
86.
1992.
I have given here a list of his poems. I think Swarayush sir's mic is still on. If anybody is a friend of Swarayush sir, can you please tell him to switch off his mic? Okay. Derek Walcott has written poems that are prescribed in our syllabi. We don't want to know everything about Derek Walcott. We are preparing for Maharashtra set, and we only want to study those books that are prescribed in Maharashtra universities. You will of course know more than me about it, but I have found out important books prescribed. They are In a Green Night. This is important because this actually changed Caribbean poetry history. This poem was a very important poem in Caribbean literary history, and it celebrates literary history of Caribbean islands. It celebrates Caribbean history, and it also talks about colonialism and post-colonialism. In a Green Night, it is also the title of his collection. In a Green Night by Derek Walcott is a poem that is about colonial, post-colonial themes. Omeros, if you read it a couple of times, you'll think of Homer. Actually, Omeros is based on Homer's Iliad. It's an epic poem reimagining the Trojan War that is discussed in Iliad. Remember, the Trojan War is discussed in Iliad. And Derek Walcott reimagines or rewrites the Trojan War. You know how? As the fight between Caribbean fishermen. The Iliad, the story of Trojans and Greeks fighting, he has rewritten in Omeros as the fight between Caribbean fishermen. That must be funny. So it is a post-colonial rewriting of Western history. A Far Cry from Africa is a very famous poem. It is prescribed all over India. A Far Cry from Africa, even though Derek Walcott is Caribbean, he is from St. Lucia. Even then, he has written about Africa. This poem is about the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. A Far Cry from Africa is about the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. When did that happen? In the 1950s. In Africa, there was a very famous Kenyan writer. Who is that? Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
Yes.
Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Weep Not Child, The River Between. These poems, these novels, as well as Ben Okri's novels, etc., are set against Mau Mau rebellion. There are many literary works set against Mau Mau rebellion. A Far Cry from Africa is also set against Mau Mau, M-A-U, M-A-U. There is a famous novel set in Chandrapur and Mau, two cities in India. Do you know that novel? That is another Mau.
Passage to India.
A Passage to India. A Passage to India is set in two cities, Chandrapur and Mau. This is Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya in the 1950s. In A Far Cry from Africa, that is the poem I'm talking about, the poet is a traveler, and the poet appears as a traveler searching for home. The poet is a traveler searching for home. Another important poem is The Sea is History. The Sea is History is also prescribed. The Sea is History is prescribed in very many universities. The Sea is History is about the sufferings of the colonial Caribbean people, the historical experiences, not Caribbean, sorry, African people. The Sea is History is also set in Africa. It is about the sufferings of the African people. And he's comparing it with the historical experiences of the Jews and the Christians. So understand, when you know like 4 or 5 poems of one writer or novels of one writer, you should definitely find out. Don't just study something or the other. Find out, when you're studying Derek Walcott, what are the books or poems prescribed in MA syllabi? Derek Walcott, MA syllabus. Like that, you should Google search. Find out the prescribed poems. Read those poems if you can. Study the summaries. And when you know 4 or 5 works of a writer, you will know the style of the writer. You will know the themes of the writer. Many questions in the exam you will be able to write easily. English literature is very vast. You know, even if you have studied for many, many years, many people were telling me we have studied for so many years, but still for a few marks we are losing net. That is because of few things you are not doing correctly. That is why. Don't panic. You will pass. It is never too late. You will pass net and set and everything. Just study thoroughly. Knowing something here and there is not enough. You should know the basics. You should know the most important works. You should know, you should be able to remember the stories and themes. Because studying, many times you're studying the same thing again. Lot of time is wasted because you keep forgetting. You should find out ways of not forgetting. You should find out ways of studying in such a way that you won't forget. Make it funny, make it into codes. Remember like that. Now, Mass Man, that is another poem that is prescribed by Derek Walcott. This title is a pun. Mass means the Christian ritual of Mass. It can also mean festival or carnival. So Mass Man is also about identity. It is about, all his poems are about dual identity, split identity, alienation, how colonialism has affected people. And Mass Man is written very importantly in free verse. Sometimes some of Derek Walcott's poems, like Mass Man, make fun of his own people for trying to imitate the colonizers too much. This is called mimicry in Homi Bhabha. In Homi Bhabha's literary theory, we have the terms mimicry, hybridity. What is meant by mimicry? The colonized people try to imitate the colonizers. But that mimicry or imitation involves a subversion or weakening of the colonizer itself. When, for example, we are colonized people, we wear jeans, which is a Western dress. In the West, where there is cold, miners were using it so that they will be protected from their harsh surroundings and work. But here, even in the south of India, where we have a hot climate, we are wearing jeans. It's mimicry, and it is unnecessary for us to wear Western clothes like that because it is suited to their climate and their lifestyle. Anyway, we are imitating the West. But when we imitate the West, it is actually reducing the power of the West because we become more like them. And their weapons we begin to use. When we speak English literature, it involves mimicry. No, English language, I mean. When we speak English language, it involves mimicry. We are imitating the masters or the colonizers, but we are also reducing their power. So that is Homi Bhabha's concept of mimicry. And post-colonial subjects are hybridity. In Derek Walcott, Walcott's poetry, you can apply these terms. Adam's Song is a poem by Derek Walcott. These are all poems, okay? Adam's Song talks about Eve and Adam. And actually, he's actually referring to human need for a peaceful existence in a general sense. Even though he's telling us the biblical story, he's actually talking about humanity in a general sense. This play by Derek Walcott is the most important play by him. Please don't write on the screen. Please don't write on the screen. Remove it. This play by Derek Walcott called Dream on Monkey Mountain is a very famous play that is prescribed in many universities. The protagonist in this play, Dream on Monkey Mountain, is Macaque, M-A-K-A-K. This is a man who has forgotten his history, who has forgotten even his real name, and he's like a monkey. There is another Indian novel where the protagonist is treated like a monkey. Do you know that novel? Not all the time, but in a little part of the novel. It's about a Dalit boy. He's treated like a monkey. Everybody makes him do monkey-like things, and ultimately he undergoes so much trouble in that novel. Finally, he dies. He's just a 14-year-old boy called Munnu. Which novel?
R.K. Narayan's. Excuse me, ma'am.
Mulk Rajanand's Coolie.
Mulk Rajanand's
I know
Coolie.
when you said R.K. Narayan, you meant Mulk Rajanand. But in the exam, don't make such mistakes. Carefully think again and then write. Okay? As soon as you see a question that you know, don't jump and make a mistake, because you will not have to have the time to go and correct it. Okay. In Derek Walcott's Dream on Monkey Mountain, we have Macaque, the protagonist, who has forgotten his name, forgotten his identity, and he despises his black identity. But at the end of the play, as you may expect, he learns to love his identity. He learns to come to terms with his identity, and he remembers his name also. Dream on Monkey Mountain. Net and set are meant for you to read the most important works and understand them very deeply. So even if you have not read this play, please find time to read it at some point. Every day before you go to bed, read for at least half an hour. If you read like that, there are so many books available online. We are living in a wonderful period of history. So many books available online. Please find time to read, because it will immensely help you to remember, to understand, and to pass exams. Tanvi and Tejal, are you there? I'm just calling out your names to just have some fun and refresh your minds. Tanvi and Tejal?
I'm here.
Very good. I'm
Yes,
glad
ma'am.
to meet you. Sister Sherlyn, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Thank you, sister. Then
Later, ma'am.
Shravan Mishra, I've never met you before, have I? Shravan, are you there? Brishali, I can see you. Are you going home from office?
No, ma'am. Today I have holiday.
What you said is not clear, but I suppose you said no. It's okay. Nitin Phalke, welcome to this program. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Very good. Glad to have you again.
Thank you.
So many people I know, so many past students and friends. Wonderful.
मेरा नाम
I suppose Diksha cannot turn on her mic. No problem. Ramya RG, Reshma.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Revan and Shashi.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Glad to see you again.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let us go back to our presentation. I was just waking you up. Ramani, you have switched on your video, but I didn't see you. Are you sleeping? No, I'm sure. She's a very diligent student. I'm sure she's listening. Okay. Now we talked about Derek Walcott's works. Let us go and talk about Derek Walcott's contemporaries, the Caribbean writers. How many Caribbean writers do you know? Can you name some Caribbean writers?
V.S. Naipaul.
Braithwaite.
Yes, Naipaul.
E.R. Braithwaite.
E.R. Braithwaite, then Braithwaite, then
George Lamming.
George Lamming.
Or
Jean
Lowless.
Rice.
Jean Rice. Somebody saying something I didn't understand.
Or, yes, ma'am. Or Lowless.
Earl Lovelace. Wow. Correct. We are not talking about all of them here.
Sam Selvon.
Sam Selvon. In Maharashtra said they will not ask about Earl Lovelace and writers like that. So today I will talk about the major writers only because we are focusing on Maharashtra set. In the post-colonial literatures webinar, I talked about more people. Okay. Kamau Braithwaite and E.R. Braithwaite, two people are there. Kamau Braithwaite is a poet and he wrote in nation language. Kamau Braithwaite is a poet and he wrote in nation language. Many Caribbean poets write in nation language. Nation language is a mix of their dialect and English. He was a very important poet from the Caribbean islands. The next important writer here is Amy Césaire. Amy Césaire is a very major name connected with negritude. Negritude was a movement founded by Francophone Arab writers, African writers, sorry. Francophone African writers who spoke French and lived in France. Amy Césaire, Leopold Sédar Senghor, Leon Damas. These are the negritude writers. When we study African literature, we talk about negritude. Amy Césaire was a poet also, but I don't think they will ask you questions about his works, but about negritude, you can expect some question. Then the next writer we have is Jean Rice. Actually, she was born in the 19th century. I should have put her first. Jean Rice is the very famous author of the book Wide Sargasso Sea. Wide Sargasso Sea is a prequel to which novel?
Jane Eyre.
Jane Eyre. Wide Sargasso Sea is a prequel to Jane Eyre. And what is the name of the protagonist in Jean Rice's novel? What is the name? Antoinette Causeway. A-N-T-O-I-N-E-T-T-E. Antoinette. A-N-T-O-I-N-E-T-T-E. Antoinette Causeway. C-O-S-W-A-Y. She is a white woman who lives in Jamaica. Jamaica is a Caribbean country. Please switch off your mics. Antoinette Causeway is a white girl who lives in Jamaica. Listen to me, story. Antoinette's mother, Annette, is feeling very lonely. She doesn't have a husband and she is feeling out of place with the other white women. She is going a little mad also. And her mother's insecurity and mental upset affects Antoinette the girl also. Antoinette was a very innocent girl. She was white, living with the blacks, and she loved her black friends. She did not have any racist ideas, but then her mother remarried. Mr. Mason was Antoinette's stepfather, and this Mr. Mason made mistakes, and there was a rebellion against Antoinette's family. The black people rebelled against the family. And Antoinette had a shock. She never thought that her black friend, Pia, etc., would turn against her. Antoinette was shocked by this rebellion against her family. And eventually she had to leave the plantation. She was taken away by her husband, Mr. Rochester. Mr. Rochester always was suspicious of Antoinette because she lived in, like Rama or the people of Ayodhya were suspicious of Sita because Sita lived in Sri Lanka under the care of our Ravan. They were suspicious of Sita. Did she have any other relationship? Is she pure? Like that, Mr. Rochester is suspicious of Antoinette, thinking, is she pure? Does she have black blood? Does she have any other affair like that? And she undergoes so many troubles. So based on race, because of her mother, because of her husband, so many mental shocks and traumas Antoinette Causeway undergoes, and eventually she goes mad. She goes mad and she's going to burn down the house. What is the name of the house where she lives? Rochester's house?
Rochester House.
Thornfield Hall. That is the name of Rochester's house. Thornfield Hall. She's going to burn down. That is how the novel White Sargasso Sea ends. Did you understand? So that is a very important rewriting of the silences in Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Gayatri Spivak has written 3 women's texts, one essay, where she talks about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Jean Rice's White Sargasso Sea, and Jane Eyre also, and she shows that when white women write or white people write, even if they are against colonialism and all that, in some subtle way, there is a justification of colonialism happening. In some subtle way, there is a justification of colonialism happening. She talks about Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, talks about Frankenstein, then Jane Eyre, and White Sargasso Sea. And the term that Gayatri Spivak used to denote this justification of colonialism in mainstream literature, that term is called worlding. Worlding. So the concept of worlding is associated with Gayatri Spivak. When you study, look today itself, look up Gayatri Spivak terms, Jacques Derrida terms, Edward Said terms. Like that, when you Google search, you will find out new terms, and it is good if you know more terms, literary theory also, right? Okay, so that is Jean Rice. The next writer we should discuss is Claude Mackay. Have you heard of Claude Mackay? To which movement did he belong?
Harlem.
Claude Mackay belonged to Harlem Renaissance. What is another name for Harlem Renaissance? No need.
Jazz age.
No, Jazz age is also 1920s, but Jazz age is not another name for Harlem Renaissance. New Negro movement. Harlem Renaissance is also called New Negro movement. Will you remember that? New Negro movement. And why is it called New Negro movement? Anybody knows? The term New Negro was taken from? Alain Locke. Alain, A-L-A-I-N. Alain, L-O-C-K-E. Alain Locke's book, New Negro. That is where it is taken from. Very famous it is. Claude McKay wrote Banana Bottom, Home to Harlem. Will you remember that? Early man. He was early writer. Next writer is Sam Selvon. Sam Selvon is the author of Lonely Londoners, very famous novel, which is part of his Moses trilogy. Moses trilogy. When I talk about Sam Selvon, can you name other writers? Let us play a game. Can you name other writers with the first name Sam? Who are other writers with the first name Sam? Sam, that is
Sam
Shyam.
Salvadorai.
Shyam Selvadurai, not Sam, Shyam. Shyam Selvadurai's major novel is
Funny Boy.
Funny Boy, very important. Shyam Selvadurai's Funny Boy is a coming of age novel. So many times I have seen questions on Shyam Selvadurai's Funny Boy in exams. This time when they gave sample questions for GATE, there also Shyam Selvadurai is there. Many times in NET and SET they have asked. Today itself, Shyam Selvadurai's Funny Boy, you should Google search and find out, okay? Shyam Selvadurai. Any other Sam, do you know? There's an American playwright, Sam Shepard, prescribed in some universities. Sam Shepard, S-H-E-P-A-R-D. His famous book is Buried Child. Sam Shepard. Do you know any other writer with the name Jean, J-E-A-N? For man and woman, both are there. Jean.
Jean Genet.
Oh, almost all French writers are called Jean. J-E-A-N. French is called Jean. Jean-Paul Sartre, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Jean Genet. So many French writers. Jean-Paul Sartre. Let me ask you some questions. We have to digress like this. Only then everything can be covered. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote the introduction to a famous book. Which book is that?
The Wretched of the Earth.
The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon. What is the first sentence of Wretched of the Earth?
Decolonization is a violent process.
Correct. Decolonization is a violent phenomenon. That is the ending of the first sentence. Correct. Decolonization is a violent phenomenon. That is how the first sentence ends. Jean-Paul Sartre belonged to which movement?
Existentialism.
Existentialism. Can you name other writers of the existential movement?
Albert Camus.
Camus, Sartre.
Major works by Sartre and Camus, both. Sartre, say first. Can you name a famous novel by Sartre? A famous novel by Sartre. Nausea, correct. N-A-U-S-E-A, Nausea. A famous play by Sartre.
Flies.
The Flies, very good.
No Exit.
No Exit, correct.
The Wall.
Who wrote the play Caligula?
Albert Camus.
Albert Camus, the other man. Who wrote, what are the two famous novels by Albert Camus?
The Plague and the Outsider.
The Outsider or the Stranger and the Plague. The Plague. Which is the essay by Albert Camus from where you get the term absurd?
The Myth of Sisyphus.
The Myth of Sisyphus. The Myth of Sisyphus is correct. Okay. Then Wilson Harris. Wilson Harris is a Guyanese writer who wrote Guyana Quartet. Then you said George Lamming. His work, always they ask in net and set. What is the name of his major work? George Lamming.
In the Castle of My Skin.
In the castle of my skin is correct. In the castle of my skin. What is the name of the protagonist in that essay? Sorry, novel. G. G is the name of the protagonist.
Yes.
Yeah, G is the name of the protagonist. In the castle of my skin. Wow, then our V.S. Naipaul. V.S. Naipaul has written so many works. I won't teach you, I will ask you questions. Most of V.S. Naipaul's novels are comic novels set in Trinidad. Okay? Which is the early novel by Naipaul, where a frustrated writer of Indian descent rises from a poor background and becomes a politician because he is good at massaging.
Times of Michael K.
No. That
No,
is
no,
by James Coetzee, not by V.S.
that
Naipaul.
massage something.
Correct, say. The mystic masseur.
Mystic masseur.
Masseur means man who massages. Masseuse means woman who massages. So, the mystic masseur, it's a comic novel, a hilarious novel, where a man of Indian descent rises from poor background and becomes a very powerful politician by massaging other people. It is a very great satire on how Indians get power. Which is the comic novel, another novel about an election that is happening. V.S. Naipaul's novel about an election. The title refers to election or voting. The Suffrage of Elvira. Suffrage means what? Voting. Voting rights. Isn't it? Suffrage of Elvira. Who is the suffragette in Sons and Lovers? Suffragette means activist for voting rights. Activist who fights for voting rights. Who is the suffragette in Sons and Lovers? The woman who is fighting for voting rights in Sons and Lovers. By D.H. Lawrence. Tell me.
Miriam.
No, Clara. Clara does. Miriam is not doing anything. Clara fights for voting rights. Clara is an activist. She is a very powerful woman in Sons and Lovers. Will you remember that? Election is the background of Suffrage of Elvira, which is the novel where Mohan, a very ill-fated
Mr.
Viswas.
growing up and he desires to have his own house. A house for Mr. Viswas.
Mr. Viswas.
What is the name of the house into which he is married?
Tulsi house.
Hanuman House.
Hanuman house, sorry. Hanuman house. Tulsi family is
Hanuman
living.
house of the Tulsis.
Tulsi family. Yeah.
What is the name of Mohan Biswas's wife?
Shama.
Shama.
Shama. Which is the novel by V.S. Naipaul that won Booker Prize?
In a free state.
In a Free State. The novel by V.S. Naipaul that won Booker Prizes In a Free State. Which is the novel set in an African country where Salim, an Indian Muslim, is the protagonist. Somebody began to say that name just now. A Bend in the River. A Bend in the River is about an African country where Salim, an Indian shopkeeper, is the protagonist. And tell me, who wrote A Bend in the Ganges, which is about partition?
Manohar Malgaonkar.
Manohar Malgaonkar. What are the other books by Manohar Malgaonkar?
Drum.
Huh?
Distant drum.
Distant drum. Correct. Then Manohar Malgaonkar belonged to Maharashtra and he was from the royal family. He fought in the army. Isn't it? That is the story of Manohar Malgaonkar. What are the books by Manohar Malgonkar? At least Google search.
The Princess.
The
Devil's Wind.
The Devil's Wind.
The Devil's
Wind.
Wind.
Wind. What are you saying? What you are saying are not very famous.
Devil's Wind is having something historical theme.
What are other important works?
Shalimar.
Famous is this based on Combat of Shadows is famous. I don't think it is described anywhere.
Yeah. The Combat of
Shalimar and all
Shadows.
are not famous. Okay. Let me ask you about another writer. Bhabani Bhattacharya. What are
So
his
many
works?
hangers.
More famous words you will be able to say.
So many hangers.
So
Why?
many hungers is his most important work. Then another important work is He Who Rides a Tiger. So many hungers, He Who Rides the Tiger, Shadow from Ladakh, Music for Mohini, Goddess Named Gold. All
The
these are
Golden Boat.
isn't it? Now coming back to V.S. Naipaul. What are the books in Naipaul's India trilogy? What are the books in Naipaul's India trilogy?
Huh.
An
An Area of Darkness.
Area of Darkness.
India, a Wounded Civilization.
India, a Wounded Civilization.
A Million
India, a Million Mutinies Now. Three famous books, all presenting India in a negative light. An Area of Darkness, India, a Wounded Civilization, India, a Million Mutinies Now. Okay? Now, next writer given here is Jamaica Kincaid. Do you know any famous book by Jamaica Kincaid?
Anyone.
Yes, Annie John, then
Lucy.
Lucy. A Small Place.
The Autobiography of My Mother. Very famous that also. Okay?
Okay.
Are you bored? Are you
No.
ready for another writer?
Yes, ma'am.
Rank Charles Dickens.
Daniel Defoe.
Daniel Defoe is
Wrong.
another.
Robinson Crusoe.
Daniel Defoe is the author of Robinson Crusoe.
Papers.
Charles Dickens
David
is
Copperfield.
which is the first novel?
Quick paper.
Big House.
Quick Papers. Which was the second novel?
Christmas Carol.
Oliver Twist.
Oliver Twist.
Third novel?
Nicholas Nickleby.
Nicholas Nickleby. Fourth novel, I don't know.
Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol is one of his Christmas books. I have given the novels here, the Pickwick Papers. He started writing in 1836. This is a Victorian picaresque novel. Oliver Twist. What is the subtitle of Oliver Twist?
Paris Boy.
Paris Boys Progress.
The Parish Boys Progress. Tell me, important characters in Oliver Twist.
Fag.
Fagin, the Jewish money lender, not money lender, pickpocket Fagin. Then
Brownlow.
Mr. Brownlow, who finally adopts Oliver Twist. Then
Nancy.
Nancy.
who is the lover of? Nancy is the lover of
Heroine of the novel.
Bill Sikes. Nancy is the lover of Bill Sikes, the thief. Nancy is a prostitute and Nancy is killed by Bill Sikes. What is the name of Bill Sikes' dog?
Bullseye.
Famous character.
Bullseye.
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 Bullseye is the name of Bill Sikes' dog. What is the name of the villain? in Oliver Twist, who approaches Fagin against Oliver?
Monks.
The villainous boy is Monks, M-O-N-K-S. After Oliver Twist came Nicholas Nickleby. Nicholas Nickleby is a school teacher and he beats up the schoolmaster. What is the name of the schoolmaster he beats? Wackford Squeers. And he runs away with a boy. For a long time in Nicholas Nickleby's life, there is another boy who is his companion. What is that boy's name? Smike.
Smile.
Nicholas Nickleby and Smike are being attacked by whom? Nicholas Nickleby's own uncle. What is his name? Ralph Nickleby. Nicholas Nickleby and Smike are being troubled by Nicholas's uncle, Ralph Nickleby. Finally, Ralph commits suicide. Why? They can ask you questions like that. In Nicholas Nickleby, Ralph is a villain and he causes trouble to Nicholas. And finally, he commits suicide. Which of the following is the reason for his suicide? He discovers that this boy Smike was his own son. Long lost son. Ralph Nickleby realizes that Smike was his own son. Did you understand? Master Humphrey's Clock is not a novel. It is like a periodical that he started where 2 novels were published. In Master Humphrey's Clock, 2 novels were published. What are they?
Old Curiosity Shop.
Old Curiosity Shop and
Barnaby Rudge.
Barnaby Rudge. In Master Humphrey's Clock, 2 novels were published. They are Old Curiosity Shop and Barnaby Rudge. Now, Dombey and Son. It is set against what period? The railways. And what is Dombey's greatest desire in that novel? To get a son. Dombey's greatest desire is to get a son. He gets a son, but he dies. And he ignores his daughter. He's very materialistic. David Copperfield. Before that, David Copperfield is narrated from a peculiar point of view. It is unlike all these novels because of point of view. What is the point of view here? First person. None of the other novels is first person. David Copperfield and later Great Expectations are first person narratives. There is only one female narrator in Dickens. In which novel do you have female narrator?
Bleak House.
Bleak House. Correct. Bleak House. What is the first chapter of David Copperfield called? I am born. I am born. Can you tell me the names of characters in David Copperfield?
Mr. Micawber.
Mr. Micawber, who is modeled upon
His father.
What is the original of Mr. Micawber?
His father.
Yeah, Charles Dickens' own father. Mr. Micawber is modeled upon Charles Dickens' own father. Then, other characters.
Clara, his mother.
Let us talk about Mr. Micawber. What is peculiar about Mr. Micawber's character? He doesn't know how to manage what? He doesn't know how to manage what? Money. Mr. Micawber is always in debt and he's in debtor's prison. Then, other characters. Other characters.
Clara Copperfield.
You are looking up. That is the mother. We don't know her name very much. Then, who is David Copperfield's nurse? Who is his stepfather?
Peggotty.
Clara Peggotty. Clara Peggotty is the nurse.
Servant.
And stepfather is Mr. Murdstone. Mr. Murdstone. Who is the aunt of David Copperfield who helps him to study? Miss Betsy Trotwood. Miss Betsy Trotwood helps David Copperfield to study. She sends him to Canterbury to study. Do you follow? There is a girl, the daughter of Mr. Wickfield, who loves him. What is her name? Finally, at the end, she becomes his wife.
Dora.
No. After Dora dies, this woman becomes his wife.
Agnes.
Agnes Wickfield. Dora is the daughter of, not Wickfield, but
Stephen.
Spenlow.
Spenlow.
Spenlow. David Copperfield was working with Spenlow and Jorkins. And Dora and David fell in love. Did you understand? Bleak House. What is the name of the female narrator in Bleak House?
Esther.
Esther Summerson.
Esther. What is the setting of Hard Times? It is unlike all the other novels. All the other novels are set in London, but Hard Times is set in
Coketown.
Coketown. Hard Times is against some philosophy. Somebody's mind. Hard Times is against which philosophy? Utilitarianism. Hard Times is against utilitarianism. What are the, sorry, I accidentally touched Little Dorrit. What are the names of characters in Hard Times?
Thomas Gradgrind.
Thomas
Bounded by.
Gradgrind. He believes in utilitarianism. He wants to teach only facts to his children. What are the names of two of his oldest children?
C.C. Jupe.
C.C. Jupe is not his daughter. What is the name of his daughter? Louisa. What is the name of his son? Tom. Louisa is married to Bounderby. Tom Gradgrind did one big mistake. He does one crime. What does he do?
Facts.
He robs a bank. Tom Gradgrind robs a bank. And another man is accused for it. What is that man's name? Stephen Blackpool. He's a laborer. Stephen Blackpool is blamed for it. At the end, he dies also. Little Dorrit, A Tale of Two Cities. Where is Tale of Two Cities set?
London and Paris.
London and Paris.
What is the name of the three major protagonists?
Lucy, Carton and Darnley.
Tell me.
Lucy, Carton and Darnley.
Lucy, Carton and Charles.
Dr. Manet.
Lucy, Sidney Carton and Charles Darnley. What is peculiar about Sidney Carton and Charles Darnley? What is peculiar about Sidney Carton and Charles Darnley? They look alike. They look the same. At the end, what happens? Sidney Carton saves Charles Darnley's life and dies instead of him. Sidney dies instead of Charles Darnley. He gets into the prison where Charles Darnley was imprisoned and dies instead of Charles Darnley. There are French Revolution is happening in the story, in the novel. And what are the names of two revolutionaries in French Revolution? That two famous characters, Monsieur Defarge and Madame Defarge. P-E-F-A-R-G-E. They are characters in A Tale of Two Cities. Are you bored, everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No,
No,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you said.
No,
No,
ma'am.
ma'am. No, ma'am.
Sure, eh? If I give you any break or if I slow down, I won't be able to cover. That's why. Who are the contemporaries of Charles Dickens given here? Benjamin Disraeli. Do you know the works of Benjamin Disraeli?
Sibyl.
Sibyl.
The Two Nations.
Sibyl or the Two Nations is correct. Then Sibyl or the Two Nations. Then
On the subjection of woman.
that is not Benjamin Disraeli. That is J.S. Mill. J.S. Mill wrote The Subjection of Women. Benjamin Disraeli's first novel was Vivian Grey. Vivian Grey. Sibyl or the Two Nations is very important. It is about the plight of the working classes. He has written many novels. You don't have to know all that. His last novel has an interesting title, Endymion. Benjamin Disraeli's last novel is Endymion. What did Elizabeth Gaskell write? What is her first novel?
North and South.
Mary Barton.
Mary Barton.
South is by
Mary
Elizabeth.
Bolton.
It is prescribed in universities. North and South by Gaskell. It refers to the northern industrial provinces in England and the southern agricultural provinces. The protagonist of North and South is Margaret Hale. Do you remember? The first novel is Mary Barton. It is also about industrial revolution. Mary Barton is subtitled The Tale of Manchester Life. North and South also shows industrialization. And it is subtitled, no, it has no subtitle. It is the protagonist is Margaret Hale, North and South. Elizabeth Gaskell wrote the biography of a famous person. Who is that?
Charlotte Bronte.
Charlotte Bronte.
Bronte. Charlotte Bronte. Elizabeth Gaskell has also written Cranford. It appeared in Charles Dickens's periodical. Which are the periodicals run by Charles Dickens?
The Year Round.
All the Year Round and Household Words. Elizabeth Gaskell's Cranford appeared in Household Words. Actually, North and South. That title was decided by Charles Dickens. Now, the next important contemporary is William Makepeace Thackeray. Where was he born first and foremost?
In India.
In Calcutta. Correct.
Calcutta.
William Makepeace Thackeray belongs to Calcutta. And what are his important works?
Vanity Fair.
Vanity Fair.
Vanity Fair. What is common to Vanity Fair and Jane Eyre? They were published in the same year, 1847.
1847.
Vanity Fair has two major protagonists. They are
Becky
Sharp.
Emilia Sedley.
Ambitious and immoral woman. Amelia Sedley is a very feminine woman. Please keep quiet and listen. Becky Sharp is very anti-Victorian woman. She is very immoral and ambitious. And Amelia Sedley is ideal woman, but Amelia Sedley is depicted as a fool. And for Becky Sharp's immorality, the society also can be blamed because society did not give women the same opportunities as men. Vanity Fair is showing the society actually more than the women. The society is vain. What is the subtitle of Vanity Fair? A
Novel without hero.
And Vanity Fair is a novel where you see that the woman is making mistakes, but that is because of circumstances. This is a typical example of naturalism. Naturalism means People behave in certain ways because of certain reasons, because of situations, circumstances. Naturalism, very important movement related to realism. Who wrote the famous French naturalist novel Nana?
Emily Zola.
Emile Zola.
Emily Zola. Naturalism is a very important movement in America. Jack London was a naturalist. What are his important works?
White
Call of Wild.
The Call of the Wild, and its sequel is called White Fang. White Fang. F-A-N-G. Then Theodore Dreiser was a naturalist who wrote an American tragedy novel. Naturalist elements can be found in Madame Bovary. Who wrote Madame Bovary?
Gustav
Naturalist elements can be found in Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Who wrote Tess of the D'Urbervilles?
Hardy.
What is the naturalist element in Tess of the D'Urbervilles? Tess is not an immoral woman. She got an illegitimate child and she murdered a man, etc. because of circumstances. That is why the subtitle of Tess of the D'Urbervilles is
A pure woman.
A pure woman. Now come back to Thackeray. What are the other novels by Thackeray?
Henry Osmond.
Henry Esmond.
Pandemon.
Huh? Before that, Barry Lyndon. Right? The history of the luck of Barry Lyndon. After that, the history of Pendennis. After that, the history of Henry Esmond. The Newcomes, the Virginians. Before all this, he had written a Newgate novel. Do you know the name? Newgate novel means what? A Newgate novel is a novel based on crime. It is crime fiction. What is the Newgate novel by Thackeray? Catherine. Can you name one Newgate novel by Dickens? Oliver Twist. Oliver Twist is a Newgate novel. Newgate novel is a very important genre of the Victorian period. We talked about Benjamin Disraeli. What is the genre related to Benjamin Disraeli? William Hazlitt coined that term. Silver fork fiction. Silver fork fiction. William Makepeace Thackeray was a realist. So was George Eliot. Remember that. Charles Reade, have you heard? What is the major book by Charles Reade?
The Cloister and the Wrath.
The Cloister and the Hearth is by Charles Reade. There are also other works. It is Never Too Late to Mend. Have you heard of that one? It is never too late to mend. The course of true love never did run smooth. Do you know where the title is taken from? The course of true love never did run smooth. A Midsummer Night's Dream. Lysander says this. Cloister and the Hearth is his very famous novel. Charles Reade. Charlotte Bronte. Apart from Jane Eyre, what else has she written? She wrote a novel before Jane Eyre which did not find a publisher. Which was that?
The Professor.
The Professor. To which country did Charlotte Bronte go to work? Belgium. She went to Brussels. The Professor is also about her Brussels experience. The Professor is the novel that depicts her Brussels experience. What are the other novels by Charlotte Bronte? Can you name another novel?
Shirley.
Shirley, then Villette. V-I-L-L-E-T-T-E. What is the pen name used by Charlotte Bronte?
Currer Bell.
Currer Bell. At which house did Jane Eyre spend her childhood? Her aunt Reed's house.
Locksley.
Gateshead. At the beginning of Jane Eyre is how many years old?
11.
The story is told. I mean, she's an adult telling her story. In her childhood, what age is depicted?
11.
10 or 11, 10. And at the beginning of Jane Eyre, she has just come back from dash.
Lower school.
Atwood School.
Oh, she has come back from walking. She was out on a walk. What happened? Not Lowood School. She went out for a walk at the beginning of the novel. She came back home and she went and sat behind the windowsill, on the windowsill, reading a book. She was not allowed to touch the books in that house. But she went and read Bewick's History of English Birds. One book she sat and read. Bewick's History of English Birds. That is the name of the book. Then her cousin John Reed comes and fights with her. He is the one who started fighting, but Jane Eyre did not let him go. She beat him up, even though he was 5 years older than her. She beat him up. And then her aunt is very angry and she is shut up in the red room where her uncle died. And she becomes scared and gets a shock. And she screams and faints. Then the doctor comes. When the doctor comes, she tells the doctor, my aunt is ill-treating me. And the doctor tells the aunt, you better send her to a school. There are schools for poor children. The doctor wanted Jane to escape from her aunt's house. And that is how she goes to Lowood School. Brocklehurst comes and takes her away. And her aunt tells Brocklehurst, this girl is a very deceitful girl. She tells lies. And alone she travels in the cart to Lowood School. And when she reaches there, it is very cold and children are not given proper coats or food. Brocklehurst is a clergyman who is stealing all this money. And Jane gets one friend, Helen Burns. And also Miss Temple, the superintendent of the school, also is kind to her. Helen teaches her to forgive like a Christian. And then Helen dies of consumption, tuberculosis. In her arms, she dies. Many children in Lowood School die because of which disease? Yellow fever.
Yellow fever.
Typhus or yellow fever. And then later Jane becomes teacher in that Lowood School. And then she responds to an advertisement given by Alice Fairfax and goes to Thornfield Hall as governess. She becomes the governess to Adele Warren, a French girl, who is the ward of Mr. Rochester. When she joins her job, everybody talks about Mr. Rochester with awe. He's like a mysterious man. And some strange laughter, etc., comes from somewhere. She doesn't know where it comes from. And it is believed, people make her believe that the seamstress who's doing the sewing is there in the attic. She's living there. And she is laughing. And Jane doesn't understand why the seamstress is still kept here. And then one day she goes out to post a letter and one horse rider comes by and falls. And she helps that horse rider. That turns out to be Rochester. Rochester starts talking to her and he is awed by her brilliance. Fearlessly she talks to him. He has never seen a woman like that. He is attracted by that brilliance. And she's very simple. She has one gray dress and one black dress. That's all. And Rochester, everybody thinks Rochester is going to marry Blanche Ingram. And all his friends come visiting. Blanche Ingram also comes. And all these rich women make fun of Jane Eyre. Jane is sad. And she starts falling in love with Rochester, but she prevents herself from doing it because she knows she is poor. And she also makes drawings all the time. She's good at sketching. And one day at a party where all the friends were there, rich friends were there, Rochester disguises as a fortune teller woman and plays a trick on everybody. And he realizes at that time that Blanche Ingram is no good and Jane is a woman of real character. And later, after Blanche Ingram and all the rich people have left, Rochester proposes to Jane in the garden. Jane cannot believe it. At first, she doesn't believe it. And then Jane is happy. That night, the chestnut tree in that garden splinters into two in lightning. It breaks into two. It is an indication that this love affair is not going to work out very well. And Jane is confused about it. Rochester wants to marry immediately. He wants to buy her rich clothes and jewelry. She would not let him buy anything for her. She only lets him buy a veil, a wedding veil. She says, I don't want colorful clothes or anything. And at that time, many mysterious things were happening. One, Mr. Mason comes and he is mysteriously attacked by somebody. Somebody mysteriously sets Rochester's bed on fire while Rochester is sleeping on it. And the night before Jane's wedding, Jane sees a strange woman in her room tearing up her wedding veil. Jane could not think too much about it or ask Rochester. Before that, the wedding day dawned and she was at the church. And at the church, a lawyer came with Mr. Mason and prevented the wedding, saying, you can't marry because Mr. Rochester is already married. And then Mr. Rochester angrily sadly takes everybody to his house, shows everybody his wife. She's a mad woman crawling on the floor on all fours, screaming. And Jane just goes and shuts herself up in her room for 3 days. She doesn't come out. She doesn't eat or anything. And Rochester waits outside. When she opens the door, finally, he gives her some wine and pleads with her, let us go away. She was mad all the time. We know Antoinette Causeway, how she went mad. Rochester ill-treated her in that novel. In Jane Eyre, he pleads with her, but Jane will not do anything wrong. Jane will not do anything that is not unchristian. So Jane escapes from that house. She wanders the countryside. She becomes very weak and hungry. And finally, she is taken in by the people at Marsh Farm. Those people are St. John Rivers and his 2 sisters. She stays there with them. St. John Rivers gets her a job as a school teacher. And St. John Rivers one day finds out that Jane, she did not tell her real name there. She says, I'm Jane Elliot. But he finds out that she is actually their cousin, Jane Eyre. And she has got an inheritance from their uncle. Jane shares that money with St. John Rivers and the other sisters. St. John Rivers loves another woman, rich woman called Rosalind. But he doesn't dare to marry her. So he proposes to Jane, even though he doesn't love her. Out of some duty, he proposes. Jane rejects him. And then at this time, Jane has been thinking of Rochester and she goes back to find Rochester. And there she finds that Rochester's Thornfield Hall had burned down. His wife had burned it down and died in the fire. And Rochester is now living in Ferndean Manor. She goes there. Now he is blind. He has lost one arm and she marries him. The chapter famously says, reader, I married him. You know, for a woman to say that even today is rare. He married me is what a woman would say. But Jane Eyre says, reader, I married him. And then they have a child and the novel ends. Rochester gets back his eyesight a little bit. That is the story of Jane Eyre. You should know the details of all the classics. Like I said now, you should know the details. Okay? Right. Emily Bronte, which is her only novel?
Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering
Also
Heights.
published in 1847. Also published in 1847. Which are the two houses in the novel?
Thrushcross Grange.
Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering.
Wuthering.
If I say Wuthering Heights is the story of, it's a revenge tragedy, will you agree?
Yes.
You can say it is a revenge tragedy. Heathcliff's revenge on these two families. Who inherits Wuthering Heights at the end after Heathcliff's death? Hareton. Hareton. What is the name of the narrator?
Nellie Dean.
Nelly.
Nellie. Telling the story to Lockwood. Our narrator is Lockwood. Wuthering Heights as a Chinese box structure or story within story within story, or Russian doll structure, or matryoshka doll structure. Chinese box structure or Russian doll structure. Okay. What are the famous works by George Eliot?
Middlemarch.
Always tell in chronological order. Don't tell in whatever order you want. First novel by George Eliot is, when you study like that. At least the first novel you say correctly.
Adam Bede.
Adam Bede.
Adam Bede.
It is the first novel. Then early novels are Silas Marner, The Mill on the Floss. Early novels were rustic novels. Later novels of George Eliot were all philosophical novels. Middlemarch is a philosophical novel. Then
Druid something.
Romola.
Deronda.
Daniel Deronda. Voice is not clear, ma'am.
Yeah, even I can't hear. Wait for some time.
can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Never
yes.
go. I will always come back. You know, because of this technology thing, you never know what will happen to your laptop and Wi-Fi. I live in a place where electricity and all are pretty good, but sometimes everything goes wrong. Anyway, I will share my screen again. I got a shock when I heard that you were planning to leave. No way. Okay. We were talking about George Eliot. Yeah. I was saying later novels are philosophical novels. They are? No. Middlemarch, Romola, Felix Holt. What is the subtitle of Felix Holt?
The
Switch off
radical.
your mics. If you're not speaking to me, switch off your mics. Tell me, what is the subtitle of Felix Holt? They have asked 2-3 times.
The radical.
The Radical. Felix Holt, The Radical. Very good. Romola is set in the 15th century. Her last novel is Daniel Deronda. Daniel Deronda. George Eliot has also written. If you are talking to other people, will you switch off your mic, please? The Impressions of Theophrastus Such. Kanmani, I think your mic needs to be turned off. Kanmani, can you please turn off your mic? Thank you. Yeah. The Impressions of Theophrastus Such. Okay. Next contemporary of Charles Dickens was Charles Kingsley. What are the important works by Charles Kingsley?
Westward Ho.
Correct. Westward Ho. Then
Eastward Ho.
The Water Babies.
very famous is title. Very famous. Water Babies is also very famous, but it is a book for children. Do you know about Wilkie Collins? What did Wilkie Collins write? Wilkie Collins.
Woman in White.
Moonlight.
Wilkie Collins was a Woman in White and the Moonstone, not Moonlight. Woman in White and the Moonstone are by Wilkie Collins. Wilkie Collins was a friend of this man who is staring at me. He's looking at me in wonder, this man who's sitting here. Do you see this man?
Dickens.
He's looking at me.
Dickens.
My
Dickens.
God knows so much about me and my contemporaries. Look at him looking at me in wonder.
Dickens.
Wilkie Collins was a friend of Charles Dickens. Wilkie Collins and Charles Dickens together wrote one play, The Frozen Deep. Wilkie Collins wrote one genre. Woman in White and Moonstone belong to one genre. What is that genre?
Science fiction.
Sensation novel.
Okay.
Not science fiction. It is sensation novel. Related to detective fiction. Tell me which American writer wrote the first detective work, detective story?
Edgar Allan.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. That is Edgar Allan Poe's detective novel, detective story. The Murders in the Rue Morgue. Who created the detective Father Brown? Which Victorian writer created the detective Father Brown?
Donald Kennedy.
G.K. Chesterton. What is what term about Victorian period did G.K. Chesterton coin?
Victorian compromise.
Victorian compromise, correct. Do you know anything about R.D. Blackmore? What did he write? Lorna Doone. Lorna Doone. It's a historical novel, romance. Before Lewis Carroll, there is George Meredith. Tell me, what are the works by George Meredith?
The Egoist.
Correct, The Egoist. Then that is a novel. It's another important novel about the period. Diana of the Crossways. Diana of the Crossways. Lewis Carroll. What is the real name of Lewis Carroll? Charles Dodgson. Charles Dodgson. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was published in which year? 1865. 1865. Thomas Hardy. What is Hardy's first novel? First published novel?
Undergreen.
Far from the madding crowd.
No. Desperate Remedies. First published novel is Desperate Remedies. Before that, he wrote a novel that he couldn't publish. That is A Poor Man.
The Poor Man and the Woman.
The Poor Man and the Lady.
Yes.
Far from the Madding Crowd is the novel where he said he introduced Wessex. He said he introduced Wessex in Far from the Madding Crowd. Under the Greenwood Tree also was written before that. Before that, he wrote, before Far from the Madding Crowd, he wrote Desperate Remedies, Under the Greenwood Tree, A Pair of Blue Eyes. Far from the Madding Crowd, who are the characters?
Bathsheba, Gabriel.
Bathsheba Everdeen, Gabriel Oak.
Mr.
Full
Oak.
name batao. William Boldwood. Frank Troy. Bathsheba Everdeen is a smart woman. She owns a farm. Gabriel Oak always loved her, but she rejected him. Then she sends one gift to William Boldwood, just teasing him. Marry me, the Valentine gift said. And William Boldwood began to propose to her, propose to her, propose to her. She kept rejecting. At that time, she met a young, dashing soldier called Frank Troy. She fell in love with him and they married. But immediately after marriage, she found out that Frank Troy had been in love with another servant girl called Fanny. He did not marry her, and Fanny got pregnant and had a child, and the child and Fanny died. Frank Troy came to know that Bathsheba knows this story. And he felt very ashamed and he ran away from home. Everybody thought Frank Troy is dead. At that time, William Boldwood threw a party and Frank Troy came there. And William Boldwood thought it is a ghost. Time Bathsheba was loved by Gabriel, and Gabriel was a very clever man. Ideal husband he would have been. And finally, Gabriel comes and tells Bathsheba, I am going away to California, to New World. And then Bathsheba realizes, oh my God, I love him. And then they marry. That is Far from the Madding Crowd. Where is the title taken from?
Thomas Gray's Elegy.
Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard. The next important novel by Thomas Hardy is The Return of the Native. The Return of the Native. What is the story? Who are the characters?
Yeobright.
Clym Yeobright has come from Paris. He used to be a diamond merchant, rich man, but he is not interested in money. He has left all that. He wants to start a school for poor children. He has come to Egdon Heath in Wessex. Who falls in love with, who wants to marry Clym Yeobright? Who wants to marry Clym Yeobright? Eustacia Y. She is very pretty and she wants money. She wants to go to Paris. That is why she is marrying Clym Yeobright. There is a man who loves Eustacia. What is his name? Damon Wildeve. Eustacia and Damon Wildeve once again start their affair when Eustacia realizes that Clym Yeobright is not taking her to Paris. After marriage, she starts an extramarital affair with Damon Wildeve. At the end, they die. Eustacia dies. She tries to run away with Damon Wildeve and falls into a water pool and dies. This is the story of Return of the Native. The native is Clym Yeobright, but the message of the story is don't try to overstretch your limitations. Live within your limitations, you know. Then there is a historical novel that Hardy wrote. The only historical novel that Hardy wrote. What is that?
Mayor of the Castle.
No, that is not a historical novel. The only historical novel that he wrote is The Trumpet Major. The Trumpet Major. Next novel that he wrote is The Mayor of Casterbridge. What is the subtitle?
Man of Character.
The Life and Death of a Man of Character. The Life and Death of a Man of Character. Who is the man? Michael Henchard. Michael Henchard is actually a very immature man. He is a drunkard. 21. When he was 21 years old, he auctioned off his wife and daughter in drunkenness. And now he doesn't drink. He's the mayor of Casterbridge and rich man. He doesn't drink because of shame. His wife and daughter come back in search for him. And he marries his wife once again. And then he is helped by another man, Donald Farfrae. Now also he is very angry and immature, and in anger he dismisses Donald Farfrae, even though Donald Farfrae was very essential in his business. He's a good man. And then his wife dies. And then Michael Henchard realizes that this girl whom he was thinking is the daughter is not his daughter. Then he starts hating her. He does a lot of mistakes in life like this. But at the end, he learns his lessons. He becomes a good man before he dies. That lessons he learns, that is what makes him a man of character. Did you understand the story? Michael Henchard. When another very important novel is Tess of the D'Urbervilles. What is the name of Tessa's father? Surname? Mr. Derbyfield. She was Tess Derbyfield. At the beginning of the novel, he is hiring he's a poor man, but he's hiring a carriage and coming to his house in great style. Why? Why? Because he heard from
the pastor.
Because he
Rhys
heard that he has some royal family
that
connection.
his family is descended from very rich D'Urbervilles, the medieval family of D'Urbervilles. The priest told him it was a lie, it was not true. So this man comes home and he and his wife want Tess to go and claim kin. That means establish relationship with the rich family of the D'Urbervilles living in the slopes. The slope and the chase, these are places in the Tess of the D'Urbervilles. And she is seduced by Alec d'Urberville there. And she gets a child, an illegitimate child called, what is the name of the child?
Sorrow.
Sorrow. After she gets Sorrow, the child. And then where does Tess go to work as a dairy maid? Where does Tess go to work as a dairy maid? Talbot's dairy. There in the May dance, whom does she meet?
Angel.
Angel.
Clare. All the girls in the dairy, what? They love Angel Clare. But Angel Clare, complete the sentence.
Loves Tess.
Loves Tess. Finally, they marry. Before marriage, she tries to tell Angel about her past story. He writes a letter and slips it under his door, but it slips under the carpet. Angel Clare doesn't see it. After marriage, when she tells him all this past story, he is confused because he is the daughter of he is the son of a Angel Clare, son of a clergyman. And he thinks Tess is impure and he leaves her. Then Tess goes to live in another farm where she has to do back-breaking work, flint slash, flint and stone. And she does back-breaking work there and she is very poor. Her father dies. In order to take care of the family, she has to become the mistress of dash. Alec. She has to become the mistress of the man who raped her first, Alec. And now, sadly, Angel Clare comes back. Then what does Tess do to Alec?
Murdered him.
She kills him. With what?
Butter knife.
And she and Angel run away. They spend many days running away. In one house they enter and they live there for a few days. And just before they are discovered, they again run away and reach where? At which place is she caught by the police? Stonehenge. At the Stonehenge, she is caught by the police. And what happens to her at the end? She is hanged. And Angel Clare along with somebody else is standing and looking at the black flag that is going up.
Lizalu.
Lizalu, who is she? Tessa's sister.
Sisters of Tess.
So, Tess of the Governments was a controversial novel that showed an immoral woman as a pure woman. After this, he wrote a novel where he presented a man and woman living together without marriage. Which is
Jude the Obscure.
Jude the Obscure.
सुनाई नहीं आ रहा है.
Somebody's mic has to be switched off. Okay. So, Jude the Obscure. Jude the Obscure is, in Jude the Obscure, Jude wants dreams of going to which university? Christminster. Christminster. Right? And after Jude the Obscure, there was so much controversy that Hardy stopped writing novels and turned to
Poetry.
Poetry. He wrote 8 collections of poetry after that. Are you ready to look at somebody else?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am.
Are you tired? Indian. Ta-da! Amitav Ghosh with an umbrella. First novel by Amitav Ghosh is The Circle of Reason. What is The Circle of Reason about? Do you know? What is the name of the protagonist in Circle of Reason? They might ask you.
Alu.
Alu is a weaver and he is mistaken to have taken part in he is mistaken to be a terrorist. See, Alu lives with his uncle in a village and he tries to disinfect the village with carbolic acid and he gets an enemy, Bhudev Roy. And all the troubles between these two, Alu and Bhudev Roy, result in Alu being suspected as a terrorist. The policeman Jyoti Das catches hold of him and there is a lot of travel across India at this stage. From Bengal to Bombay to the Persian Gulf to North Africa, the travel. The Circle of Reason, 1986. He was 30 years old when he published his first novel. What is the second novel, do you know?
Sea of Puppies.
Shadowlines.
Shadowlines, 1988. Shadowlines is a historical novel in a sense. What does the title mean, Shadowlines? The boundaries between nations are not very strong. That is the meaning of Shadowlines. It is set against Indian history, the Swadeshi movement, the partition, at the same time the Second World War, communal riots in the 1960s. Which of the following is not a historical event depicted in Shadowlines? Like that, questions can be asked. Calcutta, Delhi, London, these are the places where the novel is set. There are 2 families in Shadowlines. Do you know these 2 families? One is Ila's family. What is it called? The Price family. Price. The other family is the Datta Chowdhuries. The Datta Chowdhuries. What is the name of the narrator in Shadowlines?
Trideep.
No, it is an
Mayadevi.
narrator. Trideep is his uncle. The unnamed narrator is remembering his past, his boyhood, all the public events and political events, his uncle's life, so many things he is thinking of. This started with the friendship between one Indian man and one white man. and the narrator tells the progress of the two families and its characters. It's an epic novel, we can say, somewhat comparable to Midnight's Children. There was another non-fiction novel that he wrote after this, In an Antique Land. It is an ethnographic fiction or ethnographic text. Which country is depicted in an antique land?
Egypt.
Egypt is correct. There are two parts. In the first part, it is an anthropological narrative of Ghosh visiting two Egyptian villages. In the second part, he tells the story of a 12th century merchant called Abraham ben Yiju. Will you remember? And his two slaves. The Calcutta Chromosome is also by Amitav Ghosh. The Calcutta Chromosome is subtitled A Novel of Fevers, Delirium and Discovery. Why fevers? What fever is depicted in the novel?
Malaria.
Malaria. Who discovered the cure for malaria?
Ronald Ross. Ronald Ross.
Ronald Ross. But this novel says that Ronald Ross did not discover it. It was discovered by some Indians. This is a very complicated novel where Antar is an Egyptian. He's a computer programmer and he discovers the ID card of Murugan. And then he discovers that Murugan had pursued the history of Ronald Ross and malaria. So Antar, Murugan. So it is a story within story. The whole novel is like a puzzle. The sentences and events in the novel are like clues to the overall puzzle. It's a brilliant novel. The next novel is a very major historical novel, The Glass Palace. It shows 3 generations in which country?
Burma.
Burma, mostly Burma. Burma, Malaya and India. Burma, Malaya, India. 3 countries are depicted. The Glass Palace refers to the fragile fortunes of the Burmese royal family. There is a Burmese orphan boy in the novel. Who's the protagonist? What is his name? A Burmese orphan boy called Rajkumar. Rajkumar. Are you tired, everybody? Are you there?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
You are not there, eh?
Not tired.
No, ma'am. We are here, but we are not tired. We are not tired.
We started with 130 people. Now there are 77 people. I know that you are enjoying. So many people.
Yes, ma'am, definitely.
Is it boring?
No,
No,
not at all.
no.
It's so informative, very informative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, coming to his other novel, The Hungry Tide. It is set in Bengal. Hungry Tide is set in Bengal. In which place? Famous place. Sundarbans. The Hungry Tide is set in the Sundarbans. The government of Bengal had killed some people in a massacre. Do you know the name of that massacre, which is the setting of this novel? You don't know? Morijhapi. The Morijhapi massacre in Hungry Tide. Morijhanpi. Morijhapi. Moricha. Chjanpi. Will you get it? When I spell out a word, I'm reading from my memory. That is an example of the Derridian term.
Deference.
Écriture. Writing that is beyond language and beyond logos. Difference also is part of écriture. Difference is not a wrong answer. Écriture is characterized by difference. come to that also. The Sea of Poppies, Sea of Poppies is part of which trilogy? Sea of Poppies,
This
River of
trilogy.
Smoke, Flood of Fire. Part of which trilogy?
Iris
This
trilogy.
trilogy.
Ibis trilogy. The Ibis trilogy is a group of 3 novels. They are all historical novels set in the early 19th century. Deals with the opium war between India and China. Okay? The opium war was happening between India and China because of the East India Company. And that is the setting of these 3 novels. Sea of Poppies, River of Smoke, and Flood of Fire. The trilogy gets its name Ibis from where? What is Ibis in this novel, in these novels? What is Ibis in these novels? It is a ship. It is a ship. Many of the characters are meeting on the ship. The ship is starting from Calcutta and going to Mauritius. Mauritius is the place. And the ship gets caught in a storm. And passengers are, all the passengers do not get to Mauritius. Some of the passengers get, the others go to other places. This is the setting of the novel. Did you understand? Will you forget Mauritius? Now, Gun Island, recently published novel of Amitav Ghosh. I'm showing very canonical writers from one period or one literature. Amitav Ghosh won which award? Highest award in India?
Janapith Award.
Jnanpith Award. The Jnanpith Award. Right. Amitav Ghosh's contemporaries. The first one I've mentioned here is Geeta Mehta. I have not talked about the early first generation Indian writers. I'm talking about contemporary Indian writers. Geeta Mehta. Do you know her important works?
Yeah.
Karmakola.
Okay. Karmakola. It's a collection of many stories. It's a collection. Karmakola is a collection of anecdotes about Westerners whom Geeta Mehta has met in various times in the 1970s. Geeta Mehta's Karmakola is about many Westerners that she has met. Any other work by Geeta Mehta that you know? Raj, correct. Raj. That is about a royal character. Jaya Singh is a royal character, born into a royal family. And again, this novel also shows Western influences on people. Western influence is the theme. That nationalist struggle is happening, Western influence, Jaya Singh, royal family, please remember. Other novels by Geeta Mehta? The most famous novel you didn't say.
Inside the Haveli.
A River Sutra. A River Sutra is a most famous novel, 1993. It is the story told from the perspective of a retired bureaucrat. And he interacts with various people on the banks of Narmada Valley. On the banks of Narmada River, many people are living there. All their stories are told through the eyes of a retired bureaucrat. That is River Sutra. She has written other works also, but I don't think she's very important. Manju Kapoor, another early writer. Do you know her most famous novel?
The Daughters of
Difficult Daughters.
Difficult Daughters.
Difficult
Daughters.
Married woman.
It's the story of Veermati, a new woman who is taking her life in her own hands. Her daughter is Aida. Veermati rebels against her mother, but Aida, Veermati's daughter, does not appreciate Veermati's life. So every daughter is rebelling against her mother. 3 generations. Virmadi, her mother, her daughter Ida. Did you understand? Virmadi marries her own professor. Then other novels by Manju Kapoor are there, but not so famous. A married woman, home, the immigrant, custody, etc. Do you know who wrote In Custody?
Anita Desai.
Anita Desai. Custody is by Manju Kapoor. In Custody is by Anita Desai. Manju Kapoor is a novelist. Who wrote the play Harvest?
Manjula Padmanabhan.
Reminded me of her.
Manjula Padmanabhan.
Manjula Padmanabhan wrote Harvest. Manjula Padmanabhan. Who are the important playwrights in India? Contemporary playwrights.
Vijay Tendulkar.
Vijay Tendulkar. They might ask you one question.
Mahesh
Dattani also they might ask you. These 2 playwrights definitely study before the exam. Vijay Tendulkar and Mahesh Dattani. Then Girish Karnad, you said, okay.
Girish Karnad.
What are their plays you should know? I will give you a test, okay? Then
Arun Kolatkar.
is he a playwright?
Poet.
No other playwright, you know? Who wrote Evam Indrajit?
Badal Sarkar.
Badal Sarkar.
Badal Sarkar.
Uma Parmeshwaran, have you heard? No, doesn't matter. Next writer mentioned
Yes,
here
I
is
heard.
Vikram Seth. Vikram Seth. Vikram Seth's first novel was a verse novel. Do you know the name?
A Suitable Boy.
Suitable boy.
Suitable Boy.
First novel written in poetry.
The
Set in
Golden Gate.
California about the group of people called Yuppies in San Francisco.
The Cool Music.
The Golden Gate.
The Golden Gate.
It is a verse novel written in poetry. Novel written in poetry. Set in California, Yuppies. Don't forget that, okay? A Suitable Boy web series. Did you watch?
Yeah.
Please watch adaptations and web series whenever you can. Web series and films based on the novels. Then you will never forget anything. Okay, Suitable Boy is about one mother, Rupa Mehra, trying to find a suitable boy for her daughter, Lata. There are 4 families, the Mehras, the Kapoors, the Khans, and the Chatterjees. And they're all, what is more important than their lives is the Indian independence period. It is just after the independence, the influence of the English is still strongly felt. It is only a period of 18 months that is shown in the novel. But the post-partition, post-independent India, that is what is important in the novel. Then there is another very famous novel by Vikram Seth, set in London, about music, about love and music. Title is taken from John Donne. There is a violinist and a pianist in love. A violinist man falls in love with a pianist woman. And they meet many years.
The Traveler.
Which is that novel? An Equal Music. An Equal Music. There is another novelist, Geeta Hariharan.
Equal Music.
Geeta Hariharan's most famous novel is The 1,000 Faces of Night. The 1,000 Faces of Night. In times of siege, 1,000 Faces of Night won Commonwealth Writers' Prize. Again, 3 generations of women. Then there is a novelist that all of you will know. Many of you are working on her, etc. Chitra Banerjee Divakarani. What are her major works?
Palace of Illusions.
First major work is The Mistress of Spices. Mistress of Spices, who is the protagonist? Tilo. She is a woman living in America, selling spices. Tilotama, Tilo. Mistress of Spices was followed by Sister of My Heart, The Wine of Desire, Queen of Dreams. Palace of Illusions you mentioned. What is it a retelling of? Palace of Illusions is the retelling of
Mahabharata from the point of
Mahabharata. It is the novel by Chitra Banerjee Divakarani based on Ramayana, retelling of Ramayana. She has written a novel based on Ramayana also. The Forest of Enchantments. Later novel it is. Forest of Enchantments. Recently, 2019, Sita's version of Ramayana. In between, she wrote Oleander Girl. Arranged Marriage is a short story collection. Will you remember? Arundhati Roy. What are her two famous novels?
God of Small Things.
God of Small Things,
God of
Ministry
Small
of
Things
Utmost
and
Happiness.
The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. Before Arundhati Roy, there was Jeet Tayal. Do you know his first novel, which won a lot of praise?
Narcopolis.
Arundhati Roy has written many non-fiction works. Do you know some of her non-fiction works?
Algebra in Finite Justice.
Correct. The Algebra of Infinite Justice.
Walking with the Comrades.
Correct.
And this month published Azadi.
Azadi, very good. Freedom, fascism, fiction.
Yes, this month published this week.
Fascism, fiction, correct. Then she has written about Kashmir. She has written Listening to Grasshoppers, Power Politics. Okay. Amit Chaudhary is not only a writer but also a famous singer. Amit Chaudhary is a classical singer also. Amit Chaudhary has written many novels and edited books. Brilliant writer. And he has also Afternoon Rag, Freedom Song, The Immortals. Many of his novels are about music. Amit Chaudhary has written about D.H. Lawrence. He has written a book on D.H. Lawrence also. Will you remember? Amit Chaudhary, Jhumpa Lahiri. Before Jhumpa Lahiri, have you heard of Jerry Pinto? He lives in your Maharashtrian city. Which city? He has written about that city also. Is it Pune?
Yes.
Is it is it Kolhapur? No, it is Mumbai. Jerry Pinto is one of the famous Mumbai writers, writing about Mumbai. Mumbai Mary Jaan, he has written a book. M and the Big Whom. It was an award-winning novel. Jhumpa Lahiri, tell me her novels. Which is her first
The Interpretation of Melodies.
Interpretation of Melodies, Namesake.
Interpreter of Melodies is a collection of short stories.
Namesake.
Another book of short stories is there. Unaccustomed Earth.
Namesake.
The Namesake. What is the name of the protagonist in Namesake?
Gogol.
Gogol. The Lowland. Another book by Jhumpa Lahiri. Kiran Desai. Daughter of Anita Desai. What are her important books?
Inheritance of the Lost.
The Inheritance of Laws. Won Booker Prize. It is set in the Inheritance of Laws is set in the
Nepal.
Himalayas. Himalayas. Not Nepal, some place near Kalimpong. Is it Nepal? Okay. Now there are last contemporary writer is Aravind Adiga. Tell me, no,
White Tiger.
Allabaloo in the Guava Orchard, first major work. Aravind Adiga, tell me.
The White Tiger.
The White Tiger. What is the name of the protagonist and what is he doing?
Halwai.
He's a driver.
Balram Halwai.
Balram.
In one word, if you tell me, What is this novel about?
Darkness and
Option A,
light.
option poverty.
Lower
Entrepreneurship.
class.
Listen to me. Let me give you options first. Poverty, entrepreneurship, corruption, business.
B.
Which one of
Entrepreneurship.
two or
B,
three or
second.
four options will you take?
B.
Corruption.
Corruption.
Actually, the first choice should be entrepreneurship.
Yes.
This
How?
man is writing a letter. All these four are there. All these four are there. But he's writing a letter to the Chinese Prime Minister Wen Jiabao about Indian entrepreneurship. In China has a great economy, but no entrepreneurship. Only in India there are entrepreneurs. Did you understand? It is also about corruption. It is also about poverty. All these elements are there. A very poor man rose to very rich, to being a very rich businessman, a very rich entrepreneur. How that story is the story of White Tiger. What are the other works by Adiga?
Last Man in Tower.
Amnesty.
Last Man in Tower, then?
Amnesty.
Amnesty, correct. Then? Recent novel, Amnesty, recently published. Then?
Last Man in Tower.
Yeah. Then Between the Assassinations, that was one of the earlier novels. Between the Assassinations is about two assassinations. Whose assassinations? Indira and Rajiv. Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. These are the two assassinations, 1984 and 1991. Last Man in Tower is about Mumbai real estate. One man is refusing to give up his house to the one retired masterji is refusing to give up the house to the builder. He is living in a flat. Isn't it? That is Aravind Adiga. There are 3 or 4 very major Indian writers I did not mention because they are earlier than this. No, actually one of them should come in between. Salman Rushdie.
Salman Rushdie.
Anita Desai. Shashi
Anita.
Deshpande. Then Mulk Rajanand, Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan. These are all very important writers, as you know. I want you to look them up also. After some time, I will give you a quiz where I will ask you questions based on many of these things. Please come prepared, looking at all these people again tomorrow. Like this tomorrow, we will draw major periods from American literature, Commonwealth literature, literary theory, and we will revise all those topics. A lot of things we can cover, and because of the limitation of 6 hours, I will also give you quizzes in between to keep you refreshed of your memory. Okay? Till the exam, I will be there.
Okay, ma'am.
Helping you prepare. Let us hope you will pass this exam. Let us hope you will have brilliant careers.
That will be so kind of you.
Whatever I am doing is going to help you in a little way. All that you're going to attain is because of you, because of your work. I am only a small part. Because of me, you can't pass. Because of you, you will pass. Isn't it? I am only like a catalyst. Okay, now there are 6 participants. More than half have disappeared. Before everybody leaves and I only remain, let me stop.
Thank you, ma'am.
Otherwise, I'll be talking 59, 58.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
People are busy. They will have other things to do. Bye-bye. Thank you for...
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.